My parents left a wrapped box on my doorstep with one warning: do not make a scene. You owe us for 18 years of raising you. Then they drove off. I opened it and nearly dropped to my knees. Inside was a falsified positive illicit drug test with my name on it, forged transfer documents showing my son college fund completely drained, and a burner phone. Trembling, I dialed 911. Minutes later, my husband stepped inside, saw the contents spread across our kitchen island, and turned pale. Please do not tell me they actually did it. I am Maya, 34 years old, and a forensic accountant. I spent my entire life being ignored by my family. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against toxic relatives who thought they could completely destroy your life. I stared at the white box resting on my kitchen island. My hands shook with white-hot fury. The fake drug test glared up at me. Beside it lay the bank statements. They had perfectly forged my signature to authorize a complete withdrawal of the $75,000 David and I had painstakingly saved for our son Leo and his future. The burner phone sat silently. I did not cry. Crying was what my mother Evelyn expected from me. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. I need to report a massive identity theft and wire fraud, I said, my voice eerily calm. The perpetrators have forged documents to steal tens of thousands of dollars and are attempting to frame me with falsified medical records. The front door creaked open and David walked in carrying groceries. He stopped dead when he saw my face, then looked at the paperwork scattered across the marble countertop. The bag slipped from his hands, spilling onto the floor. Please do not tell me they actually did it, David said, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. They did, I replied, hanging up with the dispatcher after providing our address. They actually crossed the line into federal crime. David stepped closer, his eyes scanning the fraudulent bank transfers. Marcus said he was desperate to inject liquidity into his fund, but this is insanity. They are risking federal prison. I scoffed, feeling a bitter laugh escape my throat. Marcus thinks he is untouchable. He is a wealthy African-American private equity director who loves reminding everyone how much money he manages. He thinks my job as a forensic accountant is just pushing pennies around. And my parents think the sun shines out of his tailored suits because he married Chloe, their precious golden child. This all stems from last Sunday. David ran a hand over his face. I knew we should not have gone to that dinner. Last Sunday was the day the illusion of our family completely shattered. Thomas and Evelyn had invited us over under the guise of a family celebration. But the moment the appetizers were cleared, Marcus slapped a contract on the table. His firm was facing a massive margin call, and he demanded that David and I sign over the deed to our house to be used as collateral. When I refused to render my family homeless for his bad investments, Chloe started sobbing on cue. Evelyn stood up, knocking her chair backward, and pointed a trembling finger at my face. You are a heartless, ungrateful mistake, she had screamed. Your sister finally has a chance at real wealth, and you are too jealous to help her. We raised you for 18 years, and this is how you repay us. I told them my house and my son's future were not bargaining chips for a failing hedge fund. Thomas had looked me dead in the eye and warned me that family takes care of family willingly or not. Now, looking at the drained college fund and the fake drug test, I realized they had made good on that threat. They wanted to destroy my credibility so entirely that no one would believe me when the money vanished. They wanted me deemed an unfit mother and an addict so they could seize control of my assets through a conservatorship. It was a calculated, vicious strategy to strip me of everything I had built. We need to call the bank immediately, David said, reaching for his phone. We need to freeze everything before Marcus moves the money offshore. I already know where the money is going, I replied, my accounting brain analyzing the routing numbers on the forged documents. They routed it through a shell company registered in Delaware, a company I know for a fact Marcus uses to hide his clients' wealth. Suddenly, the shrill wail of approaching sirens cut through the tense silence of our kitchen. Red and blue lights flashed against our living room windows, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Thank God, David breathed a sigh of relief. The police are here. You can show them the forged signatures, and we can get ahead of this nightmare. I gathered the fake drug test and the bank statements ready to hand over evidence of my family's ultimate betrayal. But when I pulled open our heavy oak front door, the two officers standing on our porch did not have their notepads out to take my report. Their hands were resting on their utility belts, and their expressions were stony and unyielding. The taller police officer stepped slowly forward, holding up a small folded piece of paper stamped with an official seal. "Maya, you are now under arrest for corporate embezzlement and severe child endangerment," he stated loudly. I stared at the warrant in absolute shock. They had not just illegally stolen my money and faked a drug test. My parents had called the police first, spinning a web of lies so tight that I was the only one wearing the cold steel handcuffs. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and harsh industrial cleaner. The cold metal chair dug uncomfortably into my spine as Detective Miller tossed a thick manila folder onto the scratched aluminum table. He did not say a word at first. He just pulled out a stack of glossy photographs and printed bank statements, sliding them slowly across the table toward me. I looked down at offshore accounts registered in the Cayman Islands and wire transfer receipts routing money to the Seychelles. Every single document bore my social security number and a digital signature that looked exactly like mine. "You moved $4 million in the last 72 hours, Maya the detective finally stated, his voice echoing loudly in the small room. "You drained your own son's college fund to make it look like you were the victim, then you routed the rest of the stolen capital through a dummy corporation. You are facing 20 years in federal prison." I stared at the papers. I refused to let him see the panic threatening to consume me. My accounting brain immediately bypassed the emotional shock and went straight to work. I looked closely at the routing numbers, the authorization codes, and the timestamp metadata. This was Marcus and his arrogant handiwork. He had used a brute force algorithm to duplicate my digital footprint, but he was incredibly sloppy. He was always sloppy because he genuinely believed his massive wealth made him completely immune to any real scrutiny. "Detective Miller," I said, leaning forward despite the heavy steel cuffs binding my wrists. "I am a federally licensed forensic accountant. I track down hidden assets for corporate tribunals. If I wanted to hide $4 million, I would not leave a glaring digital trail leading straight back to my own home network. Look at the transaction logs right there on the second page. These transfers were executed using a proxy server, but the firewall configuration is completely wrong." Before the detective could respond to my logic, the heavy interrogation room door violently swung open. My mother Evelyn and my sister Chloe burst inside. The performance they immediately put on truly deserved an Academy Award. Evelyn practically collapsed against the doorframe, sobbing hysterically into her hands, while Chloe rushed forward, clutching a designer tissue to her perfectly contoured face. "Oh, my poor Maya," Evelyn wailed, her voice trembling with manufactured agony. "Detective, please, you have to understand our situation. My daughter has been mentally unstable since her college days. She steals to fund her terrible addiction. We tried for years to get her professional help, but she stubbornly refuses." I sat perfectly still, watching the charade unfold. Chloe placed a comforting hand on the detective's arm, playing the role of the distraught sister to absolute perfection. "She took the money to buy drugs," Chloe added, wiping away a fake tear. "We found the positive test on her porch. She was trying to hide it from us. We just want to get our sweet nephew Leo to safety before she does something completely unhinged. She is a severe danger to him." The sheer audacity of their lies was breathtaking. Evelyn was utilizing the exact same tactic she had used when I was 22 years old. Back then, she had told our entire extended family that I dropped out of my master's degree program due to a severe mental breakdown. In reality, I had finished my degree a year early while working 2 grueling jobs because she flatly refused to co-sign my student loans. She had chosen instead to use her credit to buy Chloe a brand new luxury vehicle. Now my mother was weaponizing that same fake narrative to strip me of my child and my freedom. They wanted the police to see a hysterical addict. They wanted me to scream and cry and prove their story right. I did not break down. I sat back in the metal chair and smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that made Chloe physically take a quick step backward. I turned my attention entirely away from my toxic family and focused solely on the detective. Detective Miller. I advise you to look very closely at the IP addresses listed on page 4 of those transfer logs. I said, my voice projecting absolute calm authority. I am a certified fraud examiner contracted by several federal agencies. I track laundered money for a living. The IP address that initiated these fraudulent transfers did not originate from my house or my devices. It resolves directly to a private encrypted server located in East Hampton. I paused, letting the specific geographical location sink into the room before delivering the killing blow. Which is highly coincidental considering my sister Chloe has spent the entire past week posting photos from a rented luxury villa in East Hampton. You can check her public social media accounts right now. She posted a picture by the pool at the exact timestamp the final wire transfer was authorized. The color instantly drained from Chloe's face. Her hand dropped awkwardly from the detective arm. She opened her mouth to speak, but absolutely no words came out. Evelyn immediately tried to run interference, stepping aggressively in front of her golden child. "She is lying!" Evelyn shrieked, her carefully crafted, concerned mother persona shattering in an instant. She is a manipulative addict trying to blame her innocent sister to save herself. But the damage was already done. Detective Miller held up a firm hand, silencing my mother instantly. He pulled the transfer logs closer to him, squinting at the IP data I had just pointed out. He looked from the printed paper to Chloe's panicked face, and then back to my calm demeanor. The hard certainty in his eyes wavered. He knew I had just handed him a massive glaring discrepancy in their perfect story. Miller sighed heavily and signaled to the uniformed officer standing by the door. "Take the cuffs off her," he ordered bluntly. "Maya, I am granting you a 24-hour stay of arrest. You have until this exact time tomorrow to bring me concrete proof of this framing, or I am executing the warrant and locking you up." As the heavy steel cuffs fell away, I stood up, rubbing my bruised wrists. My mother and sister were forced to step aside as I walked out of the interrogation room. But as we reached the crowded, bustling precinct hallway, Evelyn grabbed my arm. Her grip was like a vice, her perfectly manicured nails digging deep into my skin. The weeping mother facade vanished completely, replaced by pure, venomous hatred. She leaned in close so only I could hear her. "Sign the full custody of Leo and the deed to your house over to Marcus by midnight tonight," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. "Do it, or tomorrow morning I make sure the FBI gets the rest of the forged evidence." I pulled my arm out of my mother's grip. Her threat hung in the stale precinct air, but I did not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I simply turned and walked through the double doors into the blinding afternoon sun, leaving Evelyn fuming in the hallway. I knew she was not making empty threats. My family operated like a cartel, destroying anyone who threatened their bottom line. But I was not the terrified 22-year-old girl they had crushed years ago. I was a professional who knew exactly how to track their crimes. My phone began vibrating the second I started my car engine. It was not just one notification. It was a relentless, continuous buzzing that made the plastic center console rattle. I glanced at the screen while stopped at a red light. I had over 200 missed calls, thousands of social media mentions, and dozens of text messages from confused acquaintances. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the situation had escalated from a localized family dispute into a massive digital wildfire. I walked into my kitchen and opened the links my bewildered friends had sent me. There was Chloe's center screen on a viral video platform. She wore absolutely no makeup and her hair was perfectly disheveled to look authentic. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed directly into the camera lens. "My sister Maya has been battling severe addiction." Chloe wept, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of an oversized cashmere sweater. "We tried for years to save her, but she just stole my elderly parents' entire retirement fund to pay her dealers. They are going to lose their home because of her sickness." She included a direct link to a fundraising page titled Save Our Grandparents from Addict Daughter. The campaign had already raised $40,000 in just 3 hours. The comments below the video were a terrifying sea of absolute hatred directed at me. Strangers I had never even met were calling for my immediate arrest, demanding that Child Protective Services take my son away, and actively posting my home address. Chloe had meticulously cropped and edited audio clips from our dinner last Sunday, making my firm refusal to give Marcus our house sound like a deranged, drug-induced rant. It was a masterclass in public character assassination. A sharp ping from my laptop pulled my attention away from the manufactured outrage. I opened my professional inbox and felt the floor drop out beneath me. 7 unread emails sat at the top of the screen, all marked highly urgent. The first was from my largest corporate client, a massive healthcare conglomerate I had been auditing for 6 months. Due to the deeply concerning allegations currently circulating online, we are immediately suspending your contract, pending a formal investigation. The second email from a major tech firm said the exact same thing. Then the third arrived. Within 10 minutes, my entire independent forensic accounting practice was effectively destroyed. The stellar reputation I had spent over a decade building with immaculate precision was reduced to rubble by a 2-minute video of my sister fake crying on the internet. They knew exactly how to hurt me. As a forensic accountant, my entire career relied on absolute unquestionable integrity. By framing me as a desperate addict who stole from her own parents, they had nuked my professional credibility completely. The front door slammed shut, echoing through the quiet house. David rushed into the kitchen holding a stack of small canvas duffel bags. He took one look at my glowing computer screen, and his jaw set into a hard, furious line. "I saw the video," he said, grabbing Leo Wintercoat from the hall closet. "I am taking Leo to my mother's house right now. It is not safe for him here with our address plastered all over the internet." I helped him pack, shoving toys and clothes into the bags with shaking hands. "This is exactly what they want," David said, his voice rising in deep anger. "They want to isolate you and completely destroy your credibility so no one will listen to your financial findings. This is exactly like what they did to you in college." I zipped the duffel bag shut, remembering the bitter taste of that particular betrayal. When Chloe wanted a lavish destination wedding in Tuscany, my parents secretly emptied the college fund they had promised me. When my tuition check bounced and I was forced to drop out for a semester to work, my parents told our entire extended family that I was simply too lazy to handle the coursework. They protected Chloe, perfect image, by sacrificing my character without a single second thought. Now they were doing it again, but the stakes were astronomically higher. They do not care who they destroy as long as Marcus gets the capital to save his fraudulent firm, David yelled, hoisting the heavy bags onto his shoulder. "They will ruin your business, they will take our son, and they will sleep perfectly fine tonight." He kissed my forehead hard, his eyes burning with fierce protective energy. "Do not sign anything, Maya. I will get Leo settled, and I will be right back. We will fight this together." I watched his car back out of the driveway, my heart pounding aggressively against my ribs. The house suddenly felt suffocatingly empty and entirely too quiet. I walked back to my computer, ready to start tracing the crowdfunding wire transfers to prove Chloe was committing interstate fraud. I knew I could follow the digital money trail, right back to Marcus' failing accounts. Then my phone chimed with a single incoming text message. The number was blocked, but I did not need caller ID to know who it was from. I opened the message with a heavy, sinking sense of dread. It was a high-resolution photograph of David Carr pulling into the parking garage of his engineering firm, taken from a high vantage point just moments ago. He was being watched. Below the image was a short, terrifying line of text. "Your husband works for Vanguard Engineering. My private equity firm just bought Vanguard Engineering 30 minutes ago. Sign the papers by midnight, Maya. I own you." I stared at the text message from Marcus. The glowing screen illuminated my kitchen, but the cold, paralyzing dread he intended to instill never materialized. Instead, a wave of absolute terrifying clarity washed over me. Marcus thought he held all the cards because he acquired Vanguard Engineering. He thought buying my husband employer gave him the ultimate leverage to crush me into submission. What Marcus did not know was that in the covert world of high finance, there are loud, flashy apex predators, and then there are the invisible forces that control the ecosystem. I opened my specialized tracking software running the metadata from the photograph he had just sent. It took less than 2 minutes to pinpoint the exact GPS coordinates of his burner device. He was not in some corporate boardroom orchestrating his hostile takeovers. He was lounging at the Oak Ridge Country Club, the most exclusive private establishment in the state. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The drive took 20 minutes. I used that precious time to systematically route my defense. I initiated a sequence I had kept strictly dormant for years, activating the emergency protocols on my offshore trust accounts and unsealing the corporate entity I had painstakingly built under an ironclad anonymous structure. By the time I pulled my car into the pristine, perfectly manicured valet circle of the country club, I was no longer the framed sister or the desperate wife. I was the architect of their impending ruin. I bypassed the host stand, ignoring the frantic calls of the maitre d', and walked straight out onto the sun-drenched VIP terrace. The view was breathtaking, rolling green hills, meeting a sparkling, pristine lake. And there they were. My parents, Chloe and Marcus, occupied the prime corner table. Crystal flutes of mimosas sparkled brightly in the afternoon light. Silver platters of fresh oysters and wagyu sliders cluttered the expensive linen. They were laughing. A loud, raucous laughter that echoed obnoxiously across the quiet terrace. They had just tried to send me to federal prison, drain my son's future, and destroy my husband's career, and they were celebrating with a lavish brunch. My mother, Evelyn, spotted me first. Her laughter abruptly died, her smile snapping into a rigid line of absolute disgust. The rest of the table turned. Richard set his glass down so hard the crystal chimed dangerously. Chloe rolled her eyes, leaning back in her plush chair with an air of complete boredom, while Marcus just smirked, twirling a silver spoon between his fingers. "Go find another table, Maya," Evelyn sneered, her voice carrying a venomous volume designed specifically to draw the attention of the wealthy patrons seated nearby. "This one is for family, not criminals." I stopped at the edge of their table, my posture perfectly straight. "I am not here to dine with you," I said, my voice deliberately low and completely devoid of emotion. "I am here to tell you that your little hostile takeover of Vanguard Engineering was the biggest mistake of your entire pathetic career, Marcus." Marcus chuckled, a slow, arrogant sound. He signaled for the waiter, who was hovering nervously a few feet away. "Please, Maya," Marcus drawled, leaning forward. "You are embarrassing yourself. You have zero leverage. You have no money. Your professional reputation is currently burning to the ground on social media, and by tomorrow morning, David will be permanently unemployed unless you sign that house over to me. I hold the deed to your entire life." The waiter approached, carrying a black leather checkbook on a silver tray. He placed it nervously on the table. Chloe snatched the folder, flipping it open. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh that grated against my ears. "Well, since you crashed our celebration and completely ruined my morning mood, you can make yourself useful," Chloe said. She tossed the heavy leather checkbook aggressively across the table. It slid and stopped mere inches from my hands. "Pay the bill. Consider it an apology for your unhinged behavior today." I glanced down at the itemized receipt poking out of the leather binding. It was $12,500. They had apparently charged an entire season of backdated club membership fees, alongside a bottle of vintage champagne, directly to their lunch tab. They fully expected me to either break down in tears or run away humiliated, because they believed they had successfully frozen my bank accounts and destroyed my credit. My father, Richard, crossed his arms, looking at me with absolute contempt. "You heard your sister," he demanded loudly. "Pay the bill and get out of our sight before I call club security and have you dragged out for trespassing." I did not argue. I did not scream. I did not give them the hysterical reaction they were so desperately craving to validate their vicious smear campaign. Instead, I calmly unzipped the side pocket of my leather handbag. I reached inside and pulled out a sleek, solid metal American Express Centurion card. the infamous black card. It caught the afternoon sunlight, a physical manifestation of a financial tier they could only dream of reaching. I picked up the leather folder, slid the heavy metal card inside, and handed it directly to the terrified waiter. "Put it all on this," I instructed, keeping my voice perfectly steady and clear. "And add a $2,000 tip for the staff. You deserve hazard pay for having to deal with these people." The waiter swallowed hard, nodding quickly as he took the folder and practically ran toward the payment terminal inside the clubhouse. A suffocating silence slammed down over the table. The smug, victorious grins melted right off my family faces. Evelyn stared at my purse as if a venomous snake had just crawled out of it. Chloe's mouth hung open in genuine shock. They knew exactly what that card was. They knew you could not simply apply for a Centurion card. You had to be invited, and the spending requirements were astronomically high. "You stole that!" Chloe blurted out, her voice pitching up in frantic panic. "You stole someone's identity! Marcus, call the police right now. She is committing credit card fraud right in front of us." Marcus did not reach for his phone. He sat rigidly in his chair, his eyes locked on the space where the waiter had disappeared. The absolute arrogance had vanished from his posture, replaced by a creeping cold uncertainty. A forensic accountant with a suspended business license does not carry a black card unless they have a secondary massive source of hidden wealth. The waiter returned less than a minute later. His hands were shaking slightly as he placed the silver tray back on the table. The approved receipt sat on top, awaiting a signature. "Thank you, ma'am," the waiter said, his voice full of sudden, deep respect. I picked up the gold pen resting on the tray. I signed my name with a fluid, practiced motion, the ink dark and final against the paper. I set the pen down and looked directly at Marcus. Marcus, unable to contain his arrogant need to prove himself. The smartest man in the room snatched the receipt off the tray the second my hand moved away. He intended to mock whatever desperate offshore loan I had taken out. He intended to laugh at my signature. Instead, he stopped breathing. I watched the blood completely drain from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, chalky gray. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror as they locked onto the printed text just below my signature. He read the embossed corporate name of the primary cardholder. It was the name of the Apex holding company that had just aggressively bought out the debt of his failing private equity firm. "Apex Financial Forensics," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking in a high, unnatural pitch that completely shattered his carefully cultivated country club persona. He looked up from the small embossed slip of paper, his eyes darting frantically between the receipt and my face. "You are the shadow auditor the SEC hired for the tri-state area," I smiled sharply, relishing the exact moment his towering ego fractured into a million irreparable pieces. "Surprise, Marcus," I said, keeping my tone deadly calm and perfectly leveled. "I did not just crunch numbers in a windowless cubicle like you love to brag to your wealthy golf buddies. My firm is currently auditing your biggest institutional investor, and I just froze every single one of their assets pending a full federal review." The heavy silver spoon Marcus had been twirling slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering loudly against his pristine porcelain plate. The noise rang out across the VIP terrace, drawing the annoyed glances of several prominent socialites seated nearby, but Marcus did not notice. He was entirely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his miscalculation. He had spent years treating me like an insignificant clerk, assuming my government contracts meant I was a low-level bureaucrat pushing pennies. He had absolutely no idea that the Securities and Exchange Commission frequently deployed highly specialized independent forensic firms to bypass corrupt internal compliance departments. He thought buying Vanguard Engineering gave him ultimate leverage over my husband. Instead, it gave me direct jurisdictional authority to rip his entire fraudulent portfolio wide open. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the back of an empty chair. "I saw the glaring discrepancies the moment you tried to use our house as collateral last week," I continued, my voice slicing through the heavy, suffocating silence at the table. "The phantom liquidity. The over-leveraged positions cleverly disguised through multiple shell companies in Delaware." You used a brute force algorithm to forge my signature and drain my son's college fund because your institutional investors were finally demanding an audit and you were desperate to show any legitimate capital on your balance sheets. You thought you could frame me, lock me away in a conservatorship, and steal my assets before the federal investigators ever caught on. The color completely drained from Chloe's face. She sat frozen, her designer sunglasses pushed up into her hair, her eyes wide with unadulterated shock. She looked at her husband, waiting for him to laugh, to deny it, to put me back in my place. But Marcus just sat there, breathing heavily, sweating profusely in his expensive linen suit. The realization that he had just picked a fight with the ultimate financial predator was visibly destroying him from the inside out. Evelyn, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally processed the situation. She looked at the heavy black American Express card resting on the silver tray, then at the terrified face of her golden son-in-law, and finally at me. Her brain, always driven by sheer, opportunistic greed, rapidly recalculated the power dynamic at the table. The furious, hateful mother who had just tried to have me arrested for grand larceny and child endangerment vanished entirely. In her place sat a cloyingly sweet, desperately manipulative woman. "Oh, sweetie," Evelyn gasped, her voice instantly dropping an octave to feign deep maternal affection. She reached across the expensive linen tablecloth, trying to grab my hand. I pulled back, immediately repulsed by her sudden, sickening change in demeanor. "If you have this much money, why did you not just tell us?" Evelyn cried out, her eyes shining with manufactured tears of relief. "Why did you keep this a secret from your own parents? We are family, Maya. If you have the capital, you should just pay off Marcus' firm debt. It would save us all this terrible stress." The sheer, unapologetic delusion was almost suffocating. Less than an hour ago, Evelyn had stood in a police precinct and actively tried to strip me of my child and my freedom. She had fueled a viral smear campaign, destroying my reputation online, all to protect Marcus. Now, because she realized I held the keys to the kingdom, she expected me to happily bail out the very man who orchestrated the entire attack. "Yes," Chloe added, her voice shrill and panicked as she grabbed her mother's arm. "You can fix this, Maya. You owe us for making me look foolish on the internet today. Just write a check and make the SEC investigation go away. We can take the videos down and tell everyone it was just a big misunderstanding." I placed my hands flat on the edge of the table and leaned in close. The scent of their expensive champagne and raw, radiating fear mingled in the air. "Pay off his debt?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper that commanded their absolute attention. "I did not pay off his debt, Mom. I bought it." Evelyn blinked, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. "What do you mean you bought it?" "Through my holding company, I purchased the entirety of his toxic, over-leveraged margin calls for pennies on the dollar." I explained, enunciating every single word so the reality of their situation could fully sink in. "I am Marcus' sole creditor. I own his firm. I own his assets. I own his future." Evelyn smiled, a weak, confused expression spreading across her face. She clearly thought this meant the family was saved. "So you will forgive the debt?" she asked, hopefully, clasping her hands together. "Since you own it, you can just erase it, right?" I locked eyes with Marcus, watching the last pathetic drop of hope vanish from his soul. "No, I will not forgive it," I replied, cold and unwavering. "Because there is a massive problem, Mom. Marcus did not just lose that money in bad investments, he stole it." The gravity of my words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Evelyn recoiled as if physically struck, her hands fluttering nervously to her pearl necklace. Marcus looked like a man standing on the gallows watching the executioner approach. The color had completely abandoned his face, leaving his skin a sickly, ashen gray. But the stunned silence did not last long. The illusion of their invincibility was shattering, and in its place came raw, unfiltered desperation. My father Thomas, who had spent his entire life projecting an aura of quiet, untouchable wealth, finally snapped. The dignified facade he wore like a tailored suit evaporated in an instant. He slammed his fist down on the glass table so violently that a crystal champagne flute tipped over, spilling expensive vintage wine across the white linen. "You ungrateful brat!" he roared, his face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. The surrounding country club patrons turned their heads in shock, the clinking of silverware stopping abruptly, but he was too far gone to care about social embarrassment. "We did what we had to do to protect this family. We already took out a $3 million second mortgage on your house to cover Marcus' failing margins." Evelyn nodded frantically beside him, her hands trembling as she clutched her expensive napkin. "We had your signature notarized perfectly," Thomas continued, his voice echoing harshly across the sunlit terrace. "We secured the capital to keep Marcus afloat. You owe us this. We gave you life, we gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. By trying to ruin your sister's future over a little real estate loan." I did not flinch. The sheer audacity of his entitlement washed over me, but it could no longer inflict the pain it once did. I was entirely immune to their toxic brand of parental love. "Oh, you," I asked, my voice deadly calm against his screaming. "Just like you told me I owed you when I was 18. You remember that, do you not? When you borrowed my identity to take out 5 different credit cards just to pay for Chloe cosmetic surgeries?" Chloe gasped, her hands flying up to touch her perfectly sculpted nose, her eyes darting around to see if anyone at the adjacent tables had heard my accusation. "You ruined my credit before I even stepped foot on a college campus." I reminded them, the memory no longer a source of pain, but a steel foundation for my survival. "You let me work 3 jobs to pay off massive debt I never incurred, eating cheap noodles while studying until dawn, all so Chloe could look good for her sorority rush. You have spent my entire life treating my existence as a slush fund for her mistakes. But you played your hand too far this time." Thomas sneered, trying desperately to regain his dominant posture. "It does not matter what happened in the past, Maya. The deed is done. The mortgage is secured against your property. If you try to default on it to spite us, you will be the one losing your home. You will be the one living on the street with your child. We hold the leverage." I maintained my sharp, unwavering smile. I reached into my designer handbag, my fingers brushing past the velvet lining to retrieve a crisp folded document. I placed it squarely in the center of the table, right on top of the spilled champagne. "You forged my signature on a deed to a house I have not personally owned in 3 years," I stated flatly. The words stopped my father dead in his tracks. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus, who had been staring at the table in catatonic horror, slowly raised his head, his eyes locking onto the document. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling with a sudden profound dread that chilled the warm afternoon air. "As a forensic accountant who specializes in tracking hidden assets, I know exactly how vulnerable personal property can be," I explained, leaning in closer so they could hear every single syllable of their impending doom. "When David and I bought that house, I immediately transferred the property into a blind, limited liability company for security. A corporate entity governed by a strict operating agreement that requires multi-factor authentication and formal board approval for any financial encumbrances." I tapped the heavy paper resting on the table. "You did not just defraud me, Dad. You committed federal wire fraud against a heavily protected corporate entity." The silence that followed was absolute. The gentle breeze coming off the lake seemed to freeze in place. Marcus understood the severe legal ramifications instantly. His private equity firm was already bleeding out actively under federal investigation, and now his father-in-law had just admitted to a multi-million-dollar banking fraud right in front of the primary auditor. "Federal wire fraud," Marcus repeated hollowly, the words tasting like ash in his dry mouth. "Exactly," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. "When you submitted that forged mortgage application across state lines, using a digital banking portal, you triggered federal jurisdiction. The bank you used is federally insured. That makes it a major banking crime. The notary you bribed to stamp that fake signature is going to face criminal conspiracy charges. And because you funneled those fraudulent funds directly into Marcus' failing investment firm to cover up his stolen margins, you have successfully linked yourselves to his racketeering enterprise." Evelyn clutched her chest, her breathing becoming shallow and erratic. You are bluffing. You would not do this to your own family. We are your blood. We share the same DNA. You stopped being my family the day you decided my only purpose was to be a sacrificial lamb for Chloe. I fired back without a single ounce of hesitation. You thought you could strip me of my house, my husband career, and my son's stability, and that I would just quietly accept it, like the obedient little scapegoat you raised me to be. You severely underestimated me. Thomas stared at the document, his hands shaking so violently he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. The realization of his complete ruin was finally piercing his arrogant armor. He was not just facing public humiliation and bankruptcy, he was facing a lengthy sentence in a federal penitentiary. Chloe Evelyn gasped, turning to her golden child for support. Chloe, say something to your sister. Tell her she cannot do this to us. But Chloe was not looking at me. She was staring at Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. The luxurious life she felt entitled to, the designer bags and exclusive country club memberships, was evaporating before her very eyes. You told me it was handled, Chloe shrieked at Marcus, her voice cracking in panic. You told me you had the money to fix the firm. You told me my parents helping out was just a temporary bridge loan. It was supposed to be, Marcus yelled back, his polished demeanor completely destroyed. He dragged his hands through his perfectly styled hair, ruining the expensive cut. I had a massive tech merger lined up. It would have covered everything. But he pointed a trembling finger at me. She froze, the institutional capital. She blocked the buyout. Because your buyout was built on phantom funds and elaborate lies, I stated, cutting through his pathetic excuses. You stole from pensions, Marcus. You embezzled from retirement funds to maintain this lavish lifestyle. And when the market turned, you panicked. You thought taking over Vanguard Engineering would give you access to their clean corporate credit lines to wash your dirty money. You thought threatening David would keep me compliant and silent. I picked up the document from the table, carefully folding it and placing it back into my bag. The crisp sound of the paper folding seemed impossibly loud in the tense atmosphere. The federal agents are currently executing a search warrant at your corporate headquarters. I informed them, checking my watch with deliberate slowness. They walked into your pristine glass lobby exactly 15 minutes ago. They are confiscating your servers, seizing your hard drives, and freezing every single personal account tied to your name. By dinner time, your faces will be plastered across every major financial news network in the country. Evelyn let out a choked, desperate sob, burying her face in her hands. Thomas sat perfectly still, his eyes wide and vacant, as he stared at the ruined brunch spread. Chloe began to hyperventilate, realizing that her pristine socialite image was permanently destroyed. You thought you were the apex predators, I said, looking down at the people who had tormented me for my entire life. But you were just playing with matches in a room full of gasoline, and I am the one who locked the doors. Marcus shook his head violently, refusing to accept the reality closing in around him. You are lying, he spat, his voice cracking under the strain of absolute panic. The federal government cannot touch my offshore reserves. I routed everything through 5 different blind trusts in the Cayman Islands. They are completely untouchable. You are just trying to scare us. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he shoved them into his tailored jacket pockets. He pulled out a secondary encrypted smartphone, a device he thought was entirely off the grid. He tapped the screen, frantically inputting his complex biometric data to access his highly secure Cayman Islands banking portal. That portal was his ultimate safety net, the hidden vault where he had siphoned the stolen pension funds to ensure his own lavish survival while his firm crashed and burned. I watched his eyes dart across the digital display. I watched the exact second his heart stopped beating. The screen loaded in the bright afternoon sun. The account balance displayed in stark bold numbers. It read, $0. Where is it? Marcus gasped, staring at the screen, as if it had physically betrayed him. He tapped the refresh icon repeatedly, his thumb hitting the glass with frantic, heavy strikes. Where is my money, Maya? What did you do? You honestly thought you could hide stolen institutional capital from a federal forensic investigator? I asked, my tone dropping to a sharp clinical register. When I uncovered the depth of your embezzlement, I did not just call the local authorities. I flagged your specific routing numbers for international money laundering through the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Once a federal investigator officially tags an offshore account with criminal enterprise proceeds, standard banking secrecy laws evaporate overnight. The Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units does not care about your Cayman privacy shields. I presented the SWIFT network data showing the exact digital footprint of the forged mortgage funds hitting your corporate accounts, and international authorities froze your entire network, pending a sweeping federal seizure. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The phantom safety net Marcus had meticulously built was completely obliterated. He had absolutely nothing left. No firm, no leverage, and no money to hire a defense attorney to keep himself out of federal prison. Chloe stared at the blank phone screen in Marcus' hand. Her brain, historically solely dedicated to shopping and maintaining her pristine socialite image, finally registered the catastrophic magnitude of the situation. "It is gone," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with rising hysteria. "The trust fund, the summer house in the Hamptons, the yacht club fees." "You lost all of it, Chloe, please," Marcus pleaded, reaching out to grab her arm. "I can fix this. I just need time to make some calls." "Do not touch me!" Chloe shrieked, slapping his hand away with vicious force. The sound echoed sharply across the VIP terrace, completely shattering any remaining illusion of their golden couple facade. Several wealthy patrons at the adjacent tables visibly jumped, their conversations halting as they turned to watch the spectacle unfold. "You promised me we were invincible!" Chloe screamed at him, completely ignoring the wealthy audience she was drawing. "You told me my sister was just a pathetic, jealous loser who crunched numbers in a cubicle. You told me taking her house was a brilliant business move. You ruined my life. You ruined my reputation. How am I supposed to show my face at the charity gala next week?" She grabbed her crystal mimosa flute and hurled it directly at his chest. The glass shattered against his expensive linen suit, soaking his shirt in orange juice and vintage champagne. Marcus just sat there dripping and defeated, entirely broken by his own monumental greed. Evelyn watched her favored daughter unravel, and her shock instantly morphed into a blind, irrational rage. In her twisted mind, none of this was Marcus' fault for stealing, nor was it Chloe's fault for demanding a lifestyle funded by massive corporate embezzlement. It was entirely my fault for refusing to be their silent, compliant victim. "You miserable, vindictive wretch!" Evelyn hissed, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You planned this. You came here to destroy your sister's happiness because you have always been jealous of her." Evelyn lunged across the table, her hand raised, high fingers curled like claws, aiming a vicious slap directly at my face. She intended to strike me down to put me back in my place, just as she had done emotionally and physically for my entire childhood whenever I threatened to outshine her favorite child. But the blow never landed. A strong, familiar hand shot out from behind me, catching Evelyn's wrist mid-air with an iron grip. The sudden intervention halted her momentum completely, leaving her frozen in shock. I turned my head and saw David standing right beside me. His jaw was set in a hard, furious line, his eyes burning with a protective intensity that made my heart swell. He had driven straight to the country club after dropping Leo at his mother house, walking onto the terrace precisely when I needed him most. "Do not ever think about touching my wife again," David warned, his voice vibrating with a dark, terrifying authority. He shoved Evelyn's arm back toward her, forcing her to stumble backward into her plush chair. "If you come anywhere near her, I will personally ensure you face assault charges on top of your impending federal indictments." Evelyn rubbed her wrist, staring at David with a mixture of fear and absolute indignation. David stepped firmly to my side, slipping his arm around my waist, presenting a united, unbreakable front against the people who had tried to tear us apart. Thomas, witnessing the complete collapse of his family dominance, scrambled desperately for any remaining shred of control. He could not accept that the daughter he had written off as a failure had systematically dismantled his empire in less than 20 minutes. He reached frantically into his designer coat pocket. "You think you have won," Thomas growled, pulling out a crumpled folded piece of paper. He slammed it down on the table, pointing a shaking finger at the printed text. You think you can strip us of everything and just walk away? I glanced down at the paper. It was the heavily forged drug test result Chloe had used in her viral video, the fake medical document they had manufactured to paint me as a desperate addict unfit to raise my own child. I am sending this to Child Protective Services right now. Thomas threatened, his eyes wild with the frantic, cornered energy of a desperate man. I have the contacts. I have the influence in this city. I will submit this medical report, and I will testify under oath that you are an unstable, dangerous addict. They will rip that boy from your arms by nightfall. You will never see your son again. He expected me to crumble. He expected David to panic. He expected the mere threat of losing our child to force me into submission, to make me reverse the federal freezes and beg for their mercy. Instead of panicking, I looked at the forged medical document, then looked my father directly in the eyes. A genuine bright laugh escaped my lips, echoing clearly over the tense silence of the terrace. I was hoping you would say that, I replied. My father frowned, his outstretched hand trembling slightly as the crisp white paper caught the gentle afternoon breeze. The ultimate threat that was supposed to bring me to my knees had entirely misfired. He looked at the document, then back at me, his eyes searching frantically for the fear he so desperately wanted to see in mine. You are delusional, Thomas spat, trying to maintain his authoritative boom, but his voice cracked humiliatingly. I have the proof right here. It is certified by a medical professional. You cannot laugh your way out of a positive narcotic screening. I stepped closer to the table, my eyes locking onto the distinct embossed watermark visible at the top corner of the page. You really should have paid closer attention to where you purchased your little insurance policy, Dad. You bought that from Sterling Diagnostic Laboratories. Dr. Eris Thorne signed off on it, did he not? Evelyn gasped sharply, her hands flying to her mouth. Thomas stiffened instinctively, pulling the paper back toward his chest as if I could magically snatch it from his grasp. How do you know that name? Thomas demanded, his chest heaving with sudden, unpredictable panic. Because I have been tracking Dr. Thorne for 8 months, I explained, letting the absolute weight of their colossal mistake settle over the terrace. Dr. Thorne does not just run a high-end concierge clinic for wealthy suburbanites. He operates a highly lucrative, entirely illegal pill mill and fabricates medical documents for elite clients who need to pass corporate screenings or win custody battles. He has been under federal surveillance since last November. My forensic accounting firm was contracted by the Department of Justice to trace the dark money flowing through his shell companies. The blood completely drained from my mother's face. She reached out, grabbing my father's arm, her manicured nails digging deep into his expensive suit jacket. When you decided to frame me for addiction to secure custody of Leo, you needed a bulletproof medical record. I continued, my voice rising clearly over the soft jazz music playing from the clubhouse speakers. You wired $25,000 from your primary joint checking account directly to a dummy corporation owned by Dr. Thorne. You thought you were just buying a fake piece of paper to destroy your daughter. What you actually did was wire funds directly into an active, heavily monitored federal honeypot. No, Evelyn whispered, shaking her head in violent denial. No, we just paid a doctor for a private consultation. We did not know anything about a federal investigation. We are completely innocent. Ignorance is not a valid legal defense when you are caught actively funding a criminal enterprise, I countered ruthlessly. By purchasing a fabricated medical document to be used in a legal proceeding, you inadvertently tied yourselves directly to a massive federal racketeering case. You are now officially co-conspirators in a RICO indictment. Thomas looked down at the fake drug test in his hand as if it had suddenly burst into flames. He dropped it onto the glass table, stepping backward, his entire body shuddering with terror. He had spent his entire life building an unblemished, dignified reputation in the community, and he had just traded it all away in a pathetic, malicious attempt to ruin my life. As we speak, a joint task force of FBI agents and DEA operatives is raiding Sterling Diagnostic Laboratories. I informed them, glancing at my watch with deliberate, agonizing slowness. They are seizing the servers, confiscating the client ledgers, and arresting Dr. Thorne. Your names, your banking details, and the exact timestamp of your fraudulent transaction are sitting right at the top of that client ledger. You will be indicted before the weekend is over. Chloe had been sitting in paralyzed silence listening to the absolute destruction of her parents. Her perfectly contoured face twisted into a mask of pure self-preserving horror. She looked at her mother, then at her father, and made the instantaneous calculation of a true narcissist. I had absolutely nothing to do with the drug test, Chloe shrieked, standing up so fast her chair scraped aggressively against the stone patio. She pointed an accusing, trembling finger directly at her own mother. That was entirely Mom and Dad. I did not pay for it. I did not know it was fake. They told me it was real. I am entirely innocent. Evelyn stared at her golden child, her jaw dropping in sheer, heartbroken disbelief. The daughter she had sacrificed everything for, the daughter she had stolen from me to elevate, was throwing her straight under the bus without a single second of hesitation. Chloe, how could you? Evelyn cried out, reaching toward her favorite child. We did this for you. We did this to protect Marcus and keep your lifestyle intact. Do not drag me into your federal crimes, Chloe yelled, backing away from the table as if her parents were suddenly contagious. I have my own brand to protect. I cannot be associated with felons. The absolute poetic justice of the moment was intoxicating. Evelyn had spent 30 years cultivating a monster, and now that monster was devouring her to save itself. David stood beside me, his hand resting firmly and reassuringly on my lower back. He did not say a word, simply letting my family completely incinerate their own lives. Before Evelyn could unleash another hysterical sob, a sharp, repetitive ringing sliced through the chaos. It was Marcus' phone. He was still sitting in his chair, completely drenched in the mimosa Chloe had thrown at him earlier, staring blankly at the zero balance on his Cayman Islands banking app. The sudden ringing made him jump. He stared at the caller ID, his eyes widening in fresh, unadulterated terror. It was his chief financial officer, the man managing the crumbling ruins of his private equity firm. Marcus' hands were shaking so violently that when he tried to answer the call, his thumb slipped. He accidentally hit the speakerphone icon. Marcus, you need to get down here right now, the CFO voice boomed from the device, echoing across the terrace with frantic, breathless urgency. It is over. The SEC is in the lobby. They brought federal marshals. Marcus could not speak. He could not even draw a breath. He just stared at the device in his trembling hand as his entire fraudulent empire burned to the ground in real time. They have a warrant for the master ledger, Marcus. The CFO yelled, his voice cracking with absolute panic over the speakerphone. They know about the phantom liquidity. They know about the offshore transfers. They are locking down the building. What do I do, Marcus? What do I tell them? Marcus did not answer his chief financial officer. His fingers simply went limp. The expensive smartphone slipped from his grasp, plummeting downward and smashing heavily against the stone patio. The screen cracked into a spiderweb of shattered glass, but the CFO panicked voice continued to echo from the damaged speaker, pleading for an answer that would never come. The frantic, desperate voice of the chief financial officer continued to scream from the shattered phone on the stone patio, begging Marcus for instructions that were never going to come. I stared at the blinking green light of the cracked screen, listening to the echoing panic of a collapsing empire. Marcus was hyperventilating, clutching his chest as if his custom-tailored shirt was suddenly made of lead. He was cornered, a trapped animal with billions of dollars on the line. And that was exactly the problem. Trapped animals bite. My mind raced through the forensic profiles I had built on Marcus over the last 6 months. He was a coward, but a heavily funded one. He had a private jet fueled and waiting on the tarmac at the regional airport, ostensibly for a golf trip to Cabo, but I knew it was his emergency exit strategy. If I let the federal marshals drag him out of the lobby today, he would post bail by sunset and vanish into a non-extradition country before the trial even began. I could not let him run. I needed him completely anchored. I needed a spectacle so public and so devastating that no amount of offshore money could ever buy his way back into high society. I stepped forward, bringing the heel of my designer pump down hard on the shattered phone. The glass crunched sharply, cutting off the CFO frantic voice mid-sentence. The sudden silence on the terrace was deafening. I took a deep, calculated breath and forced my rigid posture to relax. I let my shoulders drop, allowing a carefully manufactured look of conflict to wash over my face. I looked at Thomas, who was still clutching the edge of the table, and then at Evelyn, who was trembling like a fragile leaf. "Listen to me," I said, softening my tone until it sounded almost sympathetic. "If Marcus goes to federal prison, the family name is ruined forever. The ensuing scandal will drag all of us down. The investigations, the asset seizures, the public humiliation. It will destroy Chloe, and it will destroy the legacy you have built. I do not want that." The shift in the atmosphere was instantaneous. Thomas slowly raised his head, his eyes narrowing as he searched my face for deception. Evelyn stopped her frantic sobbing, wiping her mascara-stained cheeks. Marcus blinked, his chest heaving as he stared at me, a pathetic glimmer of hope sparking in his terrified eyes. "What are you saying?" Marcus choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "I am the primary shadow auditor assigned to this federal task force," I explained, projecting a quiet, authoritative calm. "I have the highest level of administrative clearance. I can temporarily lift the digital freeze on your offshore accounts. I can classify the phantom liquidity as a clerical oversight, pending further internal review. I can even reroute the federal inquiry away from Sterling Diagnostic Laboratories before the FBI finishes processing Dr. Thorne client ledger. I can make the immediate legal threat go away." Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "You can really do that? You can stop the SEC? I can." I lied smoothly without missing a single beat. "But I am not doing it for free. I require something substantial in return." "Name your price," Thomas said eagerly, his aristocratic posture already beginning to reconstruct itself. "Whatever it is, we will write the check right now. We will double your current salary. We will buy you a new house. Just name it." "I do not want your dirty money," I countered sharply. "This weekend is your annual Vanguard Charity Gala. It is the social event of the season. Every major institutional investor, every corporate board member, the entire local press corps, and the city elite will be sitting in that ballroom. I want a complete, unreserved public apology." Evelyn frowned, clearly confused. "An apology?" On stage, I clarified, locking eyes with Marcus. "You will take the microphone. You will admit that you grossly mishandled firm funds. You will apologize for fabricating a malicious drug test to frame me. And you will publicly acknowledge that my financial acumen is the sole reason your empire is not currently in ruins. You will humble yourself in front of everyone you respect. If you do this, I release the digital freeze and I bury the federal investigation." I watched the psychological gears turning in their heads. It was truly a masterclass in malignant narcissism. The moment they realized they might escape federal prison, their sheer terror evaporated instantly, replaced by the towering toxic arrogance that had defined my entire childhood. They did not feel remorse. They only felt relief that they had found my supposed price. Thomas smoothed his ruined lapels, jutting his chin out with sickening pride. "I knew you would see reason, Maya. Blood is thicker than money. You are finally acting like a true member of this family. We always knew you had a good head on your shoulders when it mattered most." Evelyn offered a condescending, tight-lipped smile, her posture returning to its usual rigid superiority. "It is about time you stopped throwing these childish tantrums and protected your sister's future. We accept your little terms. It is a small price to pay to keep the family intact." Marcus, who just minutes ago had been dripping with mimosa and hyperventilating in sheer panic, actually chuckled. He stood up, rolling his shoulders back, the arrogant finance bro persona reassembling itself with terrifying speed. He walked around the glass table, stopping right in front of me. He reached out and patted my shoulder with unbearable condescension. "Good girl," Marcus sneered, his confidence completely restored. "You finally learned your place. Do the digital unfreeze by tonight. I will handle the speech on Saturday." I smiled tightly, turning on my heel. I grabbed David's hand, intertwining his strong fingers with mine, and we walked away without another word. We navigated back through the opulent country club lobby, ignoring the stares of the wealthy patrons, and pushed through the heavy glass doors into the warm afternoon sun. David remained entirely silent during the walk to the parking lot. His jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle ticked rapidly in his cheek. When we finally reached our car, he did not immediately unlock the doors. He stopped looking across the roof of the vehicle at me. His eyes were dark, swirling with deep protective frustration. "Why did you give them an out?" David asked, his voice thick with suppressed anger. "They were dead to rights, Maya. You had them completely cornered. You had the FBI raiding the lab. You had the SEC in the lobby. Why on earth would you let them walk away for a simple public apology? They do not mean a word of it." I opened the passenger door and slid into the seat, pulling my laptop from my leather tote bag before David even got behind the wheel. The moment he shut his door, I flipped the laptop open. The screen immediately illuminated the dark interior of the car, with a harsh, clinical blue light reflecting endless rows of complex forensic tracking code across my face. I looked up at my husband, a cold, calculating smile spreading across my lips. "I did not give them an out," I said softly, my fingers already flying rapidly across the illuminated keyboard. If I dropped the hammer today, Marcus would have boarded his private jet and fled to a non-extradition country by midnight. I could not risk him running. I just needed them all in one room, completely surrounded by their wealthiest investors and the press when I pull the plug for good. The drive back to our house was filled with a charged electric silence. David kept his eyes on the road, a slow, predatory smile finally replacing the furious tension in his jaw. He understood the game now. I was not retreating. I was simply building a bigger trap. By Thursday evening, the calm before the storm had settled over our house. I was locked inside my home office, though calling it an office hardly did it justice. It was a fully equipped high-tech forensic laboratory. 4 massive curved monitors dominated the sleek black desk, their screens glowing with cascading lines of code, offshore bank manifests, and encrypted transaction logs. The soft rhythmic hum of my secondary servers provided a steady soundtrack to my work. I sat in my ergonomic chair, my eyes scanning the endless streams of financial data. I was piecing together the final microscopic strings of Marcus' expansive web of deceit. Tracing illicit funds is like performing digital surgery. You have to cut through layers of shell companies, bypass international privacy shields, and follow the money through Delaware, holding corporations down to the Cayman Islands. Marcus was sloppy arrogant enough to believe no one would ever look closely at his initial capitalization logs. He assumed his current wealth provided an impenetrable armor against past sins. As my custom algorithm scrubbed through the founding documents of his private equity firm, a specific routing number flagged on my third monitor. The sequence was instantly, sickeningly familiar. I leaned forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. I manually commanded the system to trace the origin of that specific account, bypassing the dummy corporation Marcus had used to mask the transaction. The screen refreshed, pulling archived banking data from over a decade ago. The origin account belonged to Thomas and Evelyn. My blood ran completely cold. The numbers staring back at me were the exact figures of my stolen college fund, the money my parents had drained by forging my signature when I was 18. For my entire adult life, I had believed their cruel narrative. I believed they had destroyed my credit and stolen my future solely to pay for Chloe's extravagant sorority lifestyle and her lavish over-the-top wedding. They had justified my financial ruin by claiming Chloe needed a spectacular launch into high society. But the raw data on my screen told a far more sinister story. They did not just steal my money to buy Chloe designer shoes. They took my college fund, washed it through a series of localized microtransactions, and wired it directly into Marcus' initial capitalization fund. My stolen future was the seed money for his entire fraudulent empire. Thomas and Evelyn had literally sacrificed my education, saddled me with crippling debt, and forced me to work 3 grueling jobs just so Marcus could have the buy-in capital required to start his firm. The very foundation of his arrogant, untouchable wealth was built directly on my suffering. He did not earn his way into the financial elite. My parents bought his entry ticket using my stolen identity. The sheer scale of their betrayal was staggering. It was not just parental favoritism. It was a calculated systemic financial assault orchestrated by my own mother and father to ensure their golden child married a man they perceived as a winner. They had happily thrown me to the wolves to buy Marcus his crown. A sharp buzz from my cell phone shattered the heavy silence of the lab. I tore my eyes away from the damning financial records and picked up the device. The screen illuminated with a text message from Chloe. It was an image attachment followed by a block of text. I opened the image. It was a mirror selfie taken in the VIP dressing room of an exclusive downtown boutique. Chloe was posing in a breathtakingly expensive custom-beaded couture gown. The dress was dripping in crystal embellishments, undoubtedly costing more than most people earned in an entire year. She had a smug, victorious pout on her lips, her phone encased in a diamond-studded case. Below the picture was her message. "I just picked up my dress for the gala on Saturday. Make sure you do not wear anything cheap or embarrassing. We have a pristine public image to maintain, especially since you are going to be on stage apologizing to Marcus in front of all our friends. Try to look like you actually belong in our world for once." I stared at the message, a genuine dark laugh rising in my throat. Her absolute unshakable delusion was truly something to behold. She was standing in a dress paid for by stolen pension funds, gloating about a public apology that was never going to happen. She genuinely believed they had won. She believed that leveraging the concept of family honor had successfully intimidated me into submission. They all thought I was the exact same frightened, desperate girl they had kicked out of the house a decade ago. They were about to learn that the girl they abused had grown up to become the architect of their destruction. I did not reply to the text. I simply swiped the notification away and tossed the phone back onto my desk. I turned my attention fully back to my monitors. The rage that had spiked upon discovering the truth about my college fund cooled into a sharp, diamond-hard focus. I highlighted the files linking my parents to the initial fraud and merged them with the active offshore embezzlement logs. I executed a final command script tying every piece of evidence, every forged signature, every stolen dollar, and every offshore wire transfer into one massive, undeniable federal indictment package. I hit enter on my mechanical keyboard. The sound was sharp and definitive in the quiet room. A progress bar appeared in the center of my primary monitor, turning a vibrant green as it rapidly filled. Seconds later, a soft chime announced the compilation was successful. A massive data file sat on my desktop, containing enough financial evidence to put my entire family behind bars for decades. The file was titled Project House of Cards. I reached across the desk and picked up my secondary, highly encrypted government phone. I bypassed the security locks and dialed a direct line I knew by heart. The phone rang only twice before a deep, serious voice answered on the other end. "Vance," the voice stated crisply. "Agent Vance." I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of any hesitation. "The digital net is fully secured. I have the offshore logs, the initial capitalization fraud, and the SWIFT network data linking Thomas and Evelyn directly to the racketeering enterprise. The evidence packet is compiled and ready for immediate transfer." "Understood, Maya," the federal agent replied, the sound of rustling papers echoing through the receiver. "My tactical teams are on standby. Are we still targeting the Vanguard Charity Gala?" "Yes," I confirmed, leaning back in my chair and looking at the encrypted file on my screen. "Marcus and my parents believe I am going to publicly apologize to them on stage. They have invited every major institutional investor, the local press corps, and the entire city elite to witness it. They want a public spectacle." I smiled, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. "We are a go for Saturday night," I told him. "Let us give them the exact spectacle they asked for." Saturday night descended on the city with a crisp electric chill. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a masterclass in aggressive opulence, a fitting monument to the boundless greed that funded it. Thousands of hand-cut crystals dripped from the vaulted ceilings, casting a fractured, brilliant light over a sea of silk velvet and custom-tailored tuxedos. Waiters in pristine white jackets circulated flawlessly through the crowd, balancing towering silver trays of vintage champagne and beluga caviar. The guest list was a meticulously curated roster of the absolute elite. State senators, high-powered real estate moguls, tech billionaires, and the primary institutional investors who blindly funded Marcus' empire were all gathered in one room. The scent of expensive perfume and predatory wealth hung heavy in the air, masking the rotting foundation beneath their feet. Marcus and Chloe were holding court near a massive, intricately carved ice sculpture at the center of the room. Chloe was wearing the exact custom beaded couture gown she had flaunted in her text message. It sparkled blindingly under the chandeliers, a wearable manifestation of stolen pension funds. She threw her head back, laughing loudly at a joke made by a prominent hedge fund manager, playing the role of the ultimate philanthropic power couple to absolute perfection. She kept glancing toward the entrance, clearly waiting for me to arrive in something drab and sensible so she could publicly relish her superiority. Marcus stood beside her, his shoulders squared, flashing a practiced million-dollar smile to the surrounding billionaires. He had shed his panicked, hyperventilating country club persona entirely. In his mind, he had already won. He genuinely believed that my digital clearance had scrubbed his sins away, leaving him free to bask in the adoration of the very people he had been systematically robbing for years. He looked completely untouchable, radiating the smug arrogance of a man who thought he had successfully bullied the federal government into submission by leveraging family honor. Across the room, my parents were busy cementing the family mythology. Thomas and Evelyn stood in a tight, exclusive circle with a local senator and a prominent commercial developer. I could hear my father's booming voice carrying over the string quartet playing softly in the background. Thomas was bragging loudly about Marcus' unparalleled market foresight, spinning a fictional tale of how Marcus' genius investments had single-handedly insulated Vanguard engineering from the recent economic downturns. Marcus saw the market correction coming from a mile away, Thomas boasted, swirling his scotch. The boy is an absolute financial prodigy. We are incredibly fortunate to have him steering the family ship. Evelyn nodded along her heavy diamond necklace, catching the light. We always knew he was destined for greatness, she added, smiling that tight, superior smile as she accepted the envious praise of her socialite peers. It takes a certain caliber of intellect to navigate these waters, and Marcus simply operates on a higher level. They were entirely drunk on their own fabricated prestige. Every word out of their mouths was a testament to the money they stole from my college fund, the seed capital they used to launch Marcus' fraudulent firm. They were taking bows for an empire built entirely on my stolen future, absolutely clueless to the fact that the entire operation was about to implode on a national stage. Then the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom swung open. David and I stepped across the threshold, and the subtle shift in the room atmosphere was instantaneous. I was not wearing the sensible off-the-rack beige suits they always mocked. I was not the plain, awkward accountant they loved to hide in the background of family photos. I wore a breathtaking custom-tailored emerald green gown, the silk draped flawlessly, pooling like liquid glass around my heels, while the structured bodice cut a sharp, striking silhouette. The deep jewel tone made my skin glow and commanded immediate, undeniable attention. I looked nothing like the compliant, defeated woman they expected to see groveling on stage. David stood beside me in a razor-sharp midnight blue tuxedo, looking every inch the formidable, fiercely protective partner he was. We did not look like the broken scapegoats of the family. We looked like the executioners stepping onto the scaffold. The chatter near the entrance died down as heads turned. I watched Chloe spot me from across the room. Her smile froze entirely. The smug, victorious pout she had been wearing instantly dissolved into a mask of raw, visceral jealousy. She looked down at her own heavily beaded dress, suddenly realizing it looked desperate and gaudy compared to the sleek, effortless power I was projecting. Evelyn stopped mid-sentence, her champagne flute hovering frozen near her mouth as she stared at me in blatant shock. She had expected me to arrive looking suitably diminished, properly chastised, and ready to apologize for threatening their golden boy. Instead, I owned the room the very second I walked into it. Marcus noticed the sudden shift in attention, and excused himself from his circle of wealthy investors. He walked toward us, his pace brisk, his eyes darting nervously around the ballroom to ensure no one was close enough to overhear. He bypassed the usual fake pleasantries, stepping directly into my personal space. He grabbed my upper arm with a tight, punishing grip, pulling me slightly behind a massive, cascading floral arrangement near the coat check. His face was flushed with adrenaline and unearned arrogance. He leaned in close, the smell of expensive scotch and heavy cologne wafting off him. "You brought the USB drive with the unlock codes for my accounts," he demanded, his voice a low, urgent hiss, meant only for my ears. "You better not try to back out now, Maya. You owe us this." I looked down at his hand gripping my arm, a surge of absolute disgust rippling through me, but I kept my expression perfectly neutral. I met his feverish, demanding eyes with absolute icy calm. I reached into my small metallic clutch and let my fingers brush against the hard plastic of the flash drive. "Right here," I whispered smoothly, my voice steady and compliant. "But there's a slight change of plans, Marcus. I want to do the presentation myself. I will plug it directly into the master audio-visual system right before you give your keynote speech. It will be much more impactful that way." Marcus searched my face for a fraction of a second, his grip loosening. A slow, triumphant grin spread across his features, his ego completely blinding him to the danger. He genuinely believed I was eager to publicly submit to him, eager to prove my worth, and beg for my place back in the family hierarchy. He completely fell for the trap. "Good girl," Marcus sneered, patting my arm patronizingly. "You finally learned your place. Do not mess this up." I pulled my arm out of his grasp, stepping back just enough to break his physical dominance. I smoothed the silk of my gown, offering him a blank stare that he completely misread as submission. He turned and swaggered back toward his circle of sycophants, adjusting his cuffs, ready to enjoy the show. A sharp, ringing sound sliced through the ambient noise of the ballroom. A waiter was tapping a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute. The low roar of conversation began to fade, replaced by the rustle of expensive fabrics and the shifting of chairs as the hundreds of guests turned their attention toward the front of the room. The massive chandeliers dimmed, casting a warm, dramatic spotlight directly onto the center stage. It was time for the evening main event. Chloe stepped into the light. She moved with the practiced gliding walk of a woman who had spent her entire life demanding to be looked at. Her custom beaded gown caught the harsh glare of the spotlight, fracturing the illumination into thousands of tiny, blinding prisms across the room. She held a sleek, wireless microphone in one hand, her diamond rings flashing brilliantly. She paused at the center of the stage, letting the silence stretch just long enough to ensure every single eye was locked onto her. She played the gracious hostess with terrifying perfection. "Welcome, everyone," Chloe began, her voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system, pitched to a sickeningly sweet, melodic register. "Thank you all for joining us tonight at the annual Vanguard Charity Gala." Looking out at this room, seeing the titans of our city, the senators, the brilliant minds of the tech sector, and the steadfast pillars of our real estate community, I am reminded of how truly blessed we are. We are so much more than business partners in this room. We are a community. We are a family. A soft murmur of approval rippled through the audience. Marcus stood off to the side of the stage, his hands clasped behind his back, nodding solemnly as if he were a visiting dignitary. And speaking of family, Chloe continued, her tone shifting, lowering just a fraction to adopt a tone of faux vulnerability. "Family is complicated. Family requires patience. But most of all, family is about forgiveness." I felt David's hand tighten around my waist. He stood rigid beside me, his entire body coiled with anticipation. I barely registered his touch. My eyes were fixed entirely on my sister. Recently, Vanguard Engineering faced a minor internal hurdle. Chloe announced, pacing slowly across the stage, addressing the crowd with wide, innocent eyes. "We had a slight misunderstanding regarding our financial models. My sister Maya works in forensic accounting. She is incredibly detail-oriented, perhaps to a fault. And sometimes looking from the outside in, it is easy to get a little overwhelmed. It is easy to get a little jealous of the monumental success Marcus has built. She paused, letting the word jealous hang in the air, a poisonous little dart wrapped in a velvet bow. Several people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. A few wealthy socialites exchanged knowing whispered glances. But as I said, Chloe beamed, her smile widening until it looked almost manic. We are a forgiving family. We do not hold grudges. Tonight, my sister Maya is going to come up here and make things right. She is going to address this terrible misunderstanding, clear the air, and apologize to Marcus and to all of you for the confusion she caused. Because that is what families do. We heal. We move forward together. The crowd broke into polite, measured applause. It was the clapping of people who did not fully understand the family drama, but were eager to support the wealthy man managing their portfolios. Chloe extended her arm, pointing directly at me, where I stood near the back of the ballroom. Let us give a warm welcome to my sister Maya. The spotlight swung rapidly across the room, illuminating David and me in a harsh, bright circle. The applause swelled, slightly expectant and patronizing. I stepped out of the embrace of David's arm. I did not look at him. I did not need to. We both knew exactly what was about to happen. I began the walk to the stage. The ballroom was vast, and the silence that fell over the crowd was absolute. The only sound was the sharp, rhythmic clicking of my heels against the polished marble floor. Click, click, click. It echoed through the cavernous space like the ticking of a metronome counting down to 0. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. As I moved down the center aisle, I could feel the weight of 1,000 stares. They expected a mouse. They expected the jealous, plain, unstable sister Chloe had just painted me to be. But the woman walking past them in the tailored emerald green gown radiated pure, unadulterated power. My shoulders were back, my chin was high, and my gaze was locked dead ahead. I saw senators whisper to their wives. I saw institutional investors lean forward in their chairs, their brows furrowing in sudden sharp confusion. I did not look like a woman coming to beg for forgiveness. I looked like an executioner. I reached the front row of VIP tables. My parents were seated directly in the center, flanked by the city's most powerful political figures. Thomas was leaning back in his chair, swirling his scotch, a look of profound, arrogant satisfaction plastered across his face. Evelyn sat beside him, perfectly poised. As I passed her table, she leaned forward slightly. She did not bother to hide her smug, victorious smile. "Make it convincing," Evelyn mouthed, her eyes flashing with cruel triumph. "Do not embarrass us." I did not even blink. I walked right past her and ascended the short flight of stairs leading to the stage. Chloe was waiting for me at the podium. She held the microphone out, her diamond-clad fingers gripping the dark metal. Her smile was practically splitting her face in two. She leaned in as I reached for the mic, dropping her voice to a harsh, venomous whisper that the audience could not hear. "Read the script exactly as Marcus wrote it," Chloe hissed, "and try not to cry. It ruins your makeup." I took the microphone from her hand. I did not say a word. I simply turned my back on her and stepped up to the acrylic podium. I looked out over the sea of faces. I ignored my parents beaming from the front row. I ignored Marcus, who was standing in the wings with his arms crossed, waiting for his public coronation. Instead, I locked eyes with the heavy hitters in the room. The men and women who had entrusted Sterling Diagnostic Laboratories and Vanguard Engineering with their pensions, their corporate funds, and their legacies. The silence stretched, pulling tighter and tighter until the tension in the room was almost suffocating. I raised the microphone. "Chloe is right," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy air, calm, resonant, and dripping with absolute authority. "Tonight is about family, and more importantly, it is about transparency." I heard Marcus shift uncomfortably in the wings. A low murmur rippled through the front row. This was not the opening line he had written for me. "We have gathered here under the banner of charity and legacy." I continued, my eyes sweeping across the institutional investors. "But before we celebrate the future, we need to have a very honest conversation about the past." My sister mentioned a misunderstanding regarding financial models. She mentioned jealousy. But facts are not jealous. Mathematics does not hold a grudge. I unclasped the small metallic clasp of my clutch. I reached inside and pulled out the encrypted silver USB drive. "Let us look at the real numbers," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register that commanded the absolute attention of every billionaire in the room. "Shall we?" Without breaking eye contact with the crowd, I slammed the USB drive directly into the master input port on the podium console. The ballroom held its collective breath. For one agonizing suspended second, the massive 20-foot LED screen directly behind me remained pitch black. I could hear the faint, nervous rustling of silk gowns and the clinking of crystal from the front rows. Marcus stood in the wings, his confident smirk faltering slightly as he waited for the fabricated apology video he had demanded, perhaps expecting a pathetic montage of my childhood mistakes, accompanied by soft manipulative piano music. Instead, the speakers emitted a sharp, high-frequency ping that echoed like a gunshot. The massive screen flared to life, illuminating the entire Ritz-Carlton ballroom in a harsh, unforgiving crimson light. There were no family photos. There was no apology. The display was completely filled with dense, intricately mapped financial flowcharts. Columns of offshore bank routing numbers cascaded down the sides of the screen like digital rain. At the very center, a web of interconnected corporate entities pulsed with red flashing transaction warnings. It was a complete forensic autopsy of Marcus' entire criminal enterprise, projected in staggering high definition for the wealthiest people in the city to see. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. The polite high society atmosphere shattered instantly, replaced by the sharp electric current of genuine shock. I gripped the edges of the acrylic podium, feeling the absolute power of the moment surge through my veins. "Ladies and gentlemen!" My voice boomed across the ballroom, reverberating off the crystal chandeliers with unquestionable authority. For the past 5 years, you have been sitting at galas, just like this one, listening to my brother-in-law speak. You were told your hard-earned capital, your pension funds, and your corporate trusts were being safely managed. You were assured your investments were being securely funneled into highly lucrative emerging tech markets in Southeast Asia and Europe. I let my gaze sweep over the tables of institutional investors. Their faces were draining of color. Several men were already pulling out their cell phones, their expressions morphing from confusion to stark, terrifying realization. I am not standing up here as the jealous, unstable sister I was just introduced as. I continued, my voice rising over the growing murmur of the crowd. I am the lead forensic auditor assigned to the federal task force investigating Vanguard Engineering. And I am standing here tonight to tell you the absolute truth. Your money is not in emerging tech markets. Your money never left this hemisphere. I pressed the clicker in my hand. The screen behind me snapped to a new slide. A massive high-resolution photograph of a sleek, state-of-the-art luxury vessel filled the display. The purchase invoice was overlaid directly next to the image, complete with dates, wire transfer routing numbers, and ownership signatures. "Your money actually bought that $4 million yacht Marcus drove here tonight," I announced, pointing directly at the damning invoice. "You did not fund the future of technology. You funded his summer excursions to St. Bart's." The ballroom erupted. It was not a polite murmur of high society gossip. It was the loud, visceral roar of billionaires realizing they had been swindled. Chairs scraped aggressively against the marble floor as several prominent real estate moguls stood up, their faces flushed with absolute fury. I clicked to the next slide, refusing to give anyone a moment to breathe. The screen shifted to an undeniable map of a classic, albeit highly sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Red lines traced the exact path of the stolen funds, but Marcus did not act alone. I projected my voice, cutting through the rising chaos like a blade. You cannot move hundreds of millions of dollars in phantom liquidity without accomplices. You need shell companies. You need clean, respectable names to forge the initial capitalization documents. You need people who are willing to sacrifice their own flesh and blood to buy their way into power. The next slide loaded. It displayed the founding charter of Vanguard Engineering side by side with the wire transfer logs from my stolen college fund. The signatures were blown up to massive proportions. I looked directly down at the front row. Evelyn was gripping the edge of her table so hard her knuckles were completely white. Her perfectly contoured face was frozen in a mask of absolute unadulterated horror. Thomas looked as though he was having a stroke, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly, as the local senator seated next to him slowly pushed his chair away, actively distancing himself from the toxic fallout. "Those are the signatures of my parents, Thomas and Evelyn," I stated, letting the heavy, brutal reality of their betrayal hang in the air. They knowingly funneled illicit capital through dummy corporations, including Sterling Diagnostic Laboratories, to artificially inflate Marcus assets. Every single person on this stage, everyone claiming to represent family honor and corporate integrity, is actively complicit in the largest financial fraud this city has ever seen. Chloe let out a strangled, hysterical sob from the side of the stage. She looked down at her custom-beaded couture gown, the realization finally hitting her that she was literally wearing the evidence of federal crimes. She backed away from the spotlight, trying to hide in the shadows, but there was nowhere left to run. Marcus had completely abandoned his polished, untouchable persona. The illusion of grandeur was dead. He was practically vibrating with panic, his eyes wide and frantic as he realized I had not unlocked his accounts. I had locked the doors to his cage. He grabbed the discreet earpiece hidden in his ear, screaming into the small microphone with absolute unhinged desperation. "Cut the audio-visual feed," he shrieked, his voice cracking audibly over the roar of the angry investors. "Cut the power. Turn off the screen right now. Get her off that stage." He lunged toward the podium, clearly intending to physically rip the USB drive from the console, but he froze dead in his tracks. At the far back of the ballroom, the heavy soundproof oak door of the master audio-visual control booth swung shut with a resounding heavy thud. David stepped out from behind the glass partition. He smoothly slid a heavy steel deadbolt across the door, locking it entirely from the inside, barricading the control panels away from Marcus' security team. David stood squarely in front of the locked booth, adjusting his tuxedo jacket with maddening calm. He looked directly across the chaotic, screaming ballroom, catching Marcus' terrified, frantic gaze. David offered him a slow, sharp, mocking salute. The presentation was fully automated now. I did not even need the clicker. The screen behind me auto-played to the next slide, displaying the grand jury indictment tracking numbers flashing in brilliant, unavoidable red. The crimson glare of the federal indictment tracking numbers washed over the faces of the city elite. Panic was no longer a threat, it was a living, breathing entity consuming the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. But the automated presentation David had queued up was far from finished. The screen transitioned with a sharp mechanical snap. The glaring red gave way to the stark, unforgiving contrast of scanned legal documents. These were not offshore bank logs or digital wire transfers. These were archaic, heavy pieces of paper, dense with legalese and stamped with the raised seals of public notaries. I stepped out from behind the acrylic podium, letting the microphone rest comfortably in my hand. My voice cut through the rising clamor, cold and precise. Marcus was ambitious, I projected, making sure every syllable reached the back rows. But Ponzi schemes are notoriously hungry beasts. They require constant, massive influxes of fresh capital to pay off the early investors and maintain the illusion of profitability. A few months ago, the well ran dry. Marcus faced a catastrophic liquidity crisis. He needed a lifeline to keep the federal regulators off his scent just a little bit longer. He needed guarantors with immaculate credit, pristine social standing, and blind, arrogant loyalty. I gestured to the massive 20-foot screen behind me. 2 signatures were blown up to 10 times their actual size, glowing bright white against the dark background. For those of you wondering who legally underwrote this fraudulent expansion, I announced, my gaze locking onto the front table. Let me introduce you to the primary guarantors of Vanguard Engineering, Thomas and Evelyn. The silence that hit the front row was heavier than gravity. Thomas stopped breathing. His posture, previously a monument to patrician superiority, crumbled. Evelyn sat completely paralyzed, her eyes wide and unblinking, staring up at her own flawless cursive signature projected for all her high society peers to scrutinize. They did not just offer a character reference, I continued, my tone devoid of any mercy. When Marcus needed emergency capital to plug the holes in his fabricated ledgers, my parents willingly mortgaged everything: the family estate in the Hamptons, their private stock portfolios, their offshore tax shelters. They signed joint and several liability agreements legally binding themselves to every single dollar Marcus stole from all of you. The crowd began to surge. Men in custom tuxedos were shouting demanding answers, pointing accusatory fingers at the stage and at my parents. I raised my hand demanding quiet, and the sheer force of my presence forced a temporary strained hush over the room. But the absolute height of their devotion, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. The true measure of their familial loyalty was how they chose to protect their golden boy. When their own assets were completely exhausted, they attempted to leverage mine. My parents quietly initiated the paperwork to place a secondary lien on my home, intending to steal my property to prop up this collapsing scam. They were willing to render their own daughter homeless to protect a criminal. I clicked to the final document in the sequence. It was a summary of liabilities, the bottom line calculated with brutal, indisputable mathematical precision. So to the institutional investors in this room demanding restitution, I declared, I have excellent news. Marcus might have hidden his assets in dummy corporations, but his primary guarantors did not. Thomas and Evelyn are legally on the hook for $50 million of stolen capital. The number echoed through the ballroom, $50 million. At the front table, the reality of absolute immediate financial ruin finally penetrated Evelyn's perfectly curated delusion. The champagne flute she had been gripping slipped from her manicured fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered loudly, the sharp crack of breaking crystal cutting through the noise like a gunshot. The expensive vintage splashed across the polished shoes of the local senator, who was already scrambling out of his chair and moving away from my parents as if they were suddenly contagious. Thomas grabbed his chest, his face turning an alarming shade of gray. He was bankrupt, destitute. The legacy he had sacrificed my future to build had evaporated in less than 3 minutes. They were no longer the elite pillars of the community. They were accomplices to federal fraud, entirely liable for the staggering debts of their golden son-in-law. The ballroom completely lost its mind. Furious investors jumped to their feet, overturning chairs in their haste. Dozens of cell phones were instantly pulled from tuxedo pockets and designer clutches. I could hear men screaming instructions to their wealth managers, demanding immediate asset freezes and legal injunctions. A group of hedge fund managers began aggressively advancing toward the stage, their faces twisted in rage, shouting directly at Marcus. Marcus was backed against the heavy velvet curtains of the wings, hyperventilating his hands, pulling at his own hair as he watched the billionaire class turn into a pack of starving wolves ready to tear him apart. He looked utterly destroyed, stripped of his arrogance, reduced to a terrified, cornered animal. On the stage, the reality of the situation finally broke through Chloe's shock. The blinding spotlight was no longer a symbol of her superiority, it was an interrogation lamp. She looked out at the furious mob, then down at her parents who were currently being swarmed by angry creditors. Her eyes darted wildly. The instinct for self-preservation kicked in. She dropped her arms, turning sharply to flee toward the backstage exit. She wanted to vanish, to run away from the wreckage and pretend she had nothing to do with it. I did not even have to look. As she spun around, I shot my hand out and clamped my fingers around her wrist like a steel vice. Chloe gasped. Her momentum halted instantly. She yanked her arm, trying to break my grip, but I held her firmly in place under the harsh glare of the spotlight. I leaned in close, letting the microphone pick up the cold, deadly promise in my voice. Do not go anywhere. I whispered, my grip tightening until she winced. You have not heard the best part yet, sis. I released her wrist, pushing her back just enough so she stumbled into the center of the stage, trapped between me and the edge of the platform. The furious cacophony of the ballroom was deafening, a tidal wave of outrage directed at Marcus and my parents. I needed to cut through the noise one final time. I raised the microphone and spoke with a voice that commanded absolute silence. We have addressed the corporate espionage, I announced, the speakers projecting my words flawlessly over the chaos. We have addressed the catastrophic financial liabilities willingly taken on by Thomas and Evelyn, but a criminal enterprise of this magnitude is truly a family affair. It requires every member to play their part. The screen behind me snapped to black for a fraction of a second. When it illuminated again, the complex financial webs were gone. In their place stood a towering 20-foot projection of Chloe's face. It was the TikTok video. The audio from the video suddenly pumped through the Ritz-Carlton sound system. The digital version of Chloe was weeping, her makeup perfectly smudged to convey maximum distress. She was sitting in what looked like a modest, dimly lit room, staring into the camera with wide, tragic eyes. "My sister Maya has destroyed us!" the 20-foot-tall Chloe cried, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "She manipulated our accounts, stole our family savings, and left us with absolutely nothing. Please, if anyone can help us rebuild, we are begging for your support." The video looped, playing silently in the background while the other half of the massive LED screen updated to show a live web page. It was the GoFundMe campaign Chloe had launched immediately after posting the video. The green progress bar was fully filled, displaying the staggering total of $200,000 raised from sympathetic strangers across the country. The real Chloe stood on the stage beneath her massive digital counterpart, her face completely drained of blood. She looked frantically out at the audience, her hands trembling. The wealthy elites in the crowd stared back at her with a mixture of profound disgust and bewildered contempt. They were accustomed to high-stakes corporate warfare, but this was a cheap, grifting street con. It was beneath them, and the sheer tackiness of it repulsed the room. "My sister raised $200,000 online, claiming I stole from her," I stated, pacing slowly across the stage, forcing Chloe to shrink back. "She monetized a fabricated tragedy. She weaponized the empathy of innocent people to line her own pockets while her husband was actively draining your pensions." I stopped right in front of her, raising my voice so it reverberated like thunder. "Under federal law, utilizing a digital crowdfunding platform under false pretenses to solicit money across state lines is not a minor misdemeanor. It is wire fraud." Chloe's knees physically buckled. She swayed, reaching out to grasp the edge of the acrylic podium to keep herself from collapsing onto the floor. "Every single donation processed through that webpage constitutes a separate federal offense." I continued, my gaze locked onto her terrified eyes. "You did not just embarrass yourself online, Chloe. You documented your own federal crimes in high definition and broadcast them to the entire world." A harsh, desperate sob ripped from Chloe's throat. She looked down at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the people she had spent her life trying to impress. But I was not finished. I turned my attention back to the front row where Evelyn was still sitting amid the shattered glass of her champagne flute. The social annihilation of my sister and my brother-in-law was complete. Now it was time to strip away the very last shred of dignity my parents clung to. I needed the society they worshipped to see the exact monsters they truly were beneath the designer clothes and the philanthropic smiles. "Financial crimes carry heavy sentences," I said, my voice dropping to a somber, chilling pitch. "But the rot in this family goes much deeper than stolen capital. You have seen the depths of their greed. Now I want you to hear the reality of their supposed family values." I gave a sharp nod toward the back of the room where David was safely locked inside the audiovisual booth. The screen behind me went completely dark. The entire ballroom was plunged into a tense, heavy twilight, illuminated only by the warm glow of the table centerpieces. A sharp crackle of static hissed through the speakers, followed by the undeniable, hollow acoustic echo of a police precinct holding room. Then Evelyn's voice filled the ballroom. It was not the refined, modulated tone she used at country club luncheons or charity galas. It was the vicious, snarling, predatory voice I had endured my entire life. "You listen to me, you pathetic, ungrateful little wretch!" The recorded voice of Evelyn spat the malice dripping from every syllable. "You are going to drop these ridiculous charges, or I swear to God I will dismantle your entire life. I will take your child. I have the lawyers. I have the money. I will prove you are an unfit, unstable mother, and you will never see your child again. You are nothing. You have always been nothing." The recording cut off with a sharp click. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating vacuum. No one moved. No one breathed. The wealthy socialites, the politicians, the corporate titans, they all turned to stare at Evelyn. The revulsion on their faces was visceral. Financial fraud was a crime they could comprehend, a risk they understood in their world. But listening to a grandmother viciously threaten to steal a child from her own daughter, listening to that level of raw, concentrated domestic abuse, broke a fundamental taboo. It was repulsive. The local senator, who had been trying to edge away from Thomas, stood up completely. He looked at Evelyn with undisguised horror, shook his head in disgust, and briskly walked away from the VIP table, abandoning them entirely. The social death of Thomas and Evelyn was instantaneous and irreversible. They were pariahs. Evelyn raised her trembling hands, covering her face, as a quiet, jagged whimper escaped her lips. Thomas sat frozen, staring blankly ahead, completely broken by the magnitude of their ruin. Marcus was still thrashing near the side curtains, desperately trying to find a way out of the building. He shoved past a bewildered waiter, making a mad dash for the side exit that led to the kitchen corridors. Suddenly, a loud, echoing boom shattered the quiet of the ballroom. The massive double mahogany doors at the main entrance slammed completely shut. The heavy brass locks engaged with a synchronized mechanical clack that resonated through the vast space. The side doors leading to the kitchens and the coat checks followed suit, slamming shut and locking tight. No one could leave. A collective murmur of panic began to rise from the crowd as people realized they were sealed inside the grand ballroom. Then the floor-to-ceiling windows lining the eastern wall of the Ritz-Carlton caught the light. Piercing beams of strobing red and blue began to flash aggressively through the sheer curtains, washing over the crystal chandeliers and the terrified faces of the guests. The frantic spinning lights cast long, erratic shadows across the stage, illuminating Marcus where he stood frozen halfway to a locked door. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and more urgent by the second, signaling the end of the Vanguard Empire. The flashing red and blue lights filtering through the sheer curtains painted Chloe's face in a strobe of panic. Her eyes darted from the locked exit doors to the towering projection of her own fraudulent fundraising campaign, and finally to the terrifying reality assembling outside the Ritz-Carlton. The wail of sirens cut off abruptly, replaced by the heavy, synchronized slamming of car doors. The elite guests in the ballroom, the very people Chloe had spent her entire adult life trying to impress, were now backing away from the stage in absolute revulsion. They formed a wide, empty circle around us, treating my sister like she was a walking contagion. A sharp, deafening crash echoed from the back of the room. The heavy brass locks on the main mahogany doors gave way with a metallic screech. A dozen federal agents poured into the grand ballroom. They moved with a terrifying, coordinated precision that completely shattered the fragile illusion of high society elegance. FBI agents in tactical vests, bearing bold yellow lettering, fanned out across the perimeter, securing every possible exit. Right behind them marched a team of SEC investigators, their faces set in grim lines of absolute authority. The contrast was staggering. These were not the polite, deferential staff the Vanguard executives were used to commanding. These were the architects of their ruin. Leading the pack was Agent Vance. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a gaze that could cut through steel. He strode down the center aisle, the same path I had taken just minutes before, holding a thick stack of federal warrants clipped to a heavy board. He did not look impressed by the crystal chandeliers or the custom-tailored suits. He looked like a man who had spent the last 2 years tracking a rat through a sewer, and he had finally cornered it. Marcus saw Vance approaching and completely lost his mind. The suave, untouchable tech billionaire vanished, replaced instantly by a cornered, panicked animal. He realized the main doors were breached and the front stage was a trap. His eyes locked onto the discreet service corridor near the kitchen, the only exit not immediately flooded with tactical gear. Marcus shoved hard against the podium, practically leaping off the side of the stage. He barreled into the crowd, abandoning every ounce of dignity he possessed. "Get out of my way!" Marcus screamed, shoving a prominent real estate developer violently into a cocktail table. Crystal glasses shattered across the marble floor in a cascade of expensive liquor and panic. Marcus did not care. He trampled over the broken glass, sprinting blindly toward the service elevator. He shoved a local senator aside, his tailored tuxedo jacket ripping at the seam as he scrambled for freedom. He was less than 10 feet away from the kitchen doors. He thought he had made it. He thought his money had bought him one final escape route. He was wrong. Two men in pristine white waiter jackets. The same men who had been flawlessly serving beluga caviar just an hour earlier suddenly dropped their silver trays. They did not hesitate. Before Marcus could even register the threat, the first plainclothes agent hit him low, wrapping his arms around Marcus' legs and taking him down hard onto the polished marble. The second agent was on him a fraction of a second later, driving a knee directly into Marcus' back and pinning him flat against the floor. "Get your hands behind your back," the agent roared, yanking Marcus' arm upward with a sharp, forceful jerk. Marcus thrashed wildly, screaming obscenities and demanding his lawyers, his face pressed directly into a puddle of spilled champagne and crushed caviar. The sharp, unmistakable click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent ballroom. The golden boy of Vanguard Engineering was reduced to a writhing, humiliated mess on the floor, restrained by the very people he thought were beneath his notice. Agent Vance did not even break his stride to look at Marcus. He marched straight past the struggle and headed directly for the VIP table in the front row. Thomas and Evelyn remained frozen in their seats. They looked like wax figures, their arrogant patrician masks melting away to reveal the hollow, terrified cowards hiding underneath. Evelyn clutched her heavy diamond necklace, her chest heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. Thomas stared up at Agent Vance, his mouth opening and closing, but failing to produce a single sound. The reality of their $50 million liability had broken their spirits, but the sight of the federal warrants in Vance's hand broke their minds. Thomas and Evelyn. Agent Vance stated, his voice booming with undeniable finality. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and racketeering." Evelyn let out a sharp, high-pitched shriek. She jerked her hands away as a female agent stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt. "You cannot do this," Evelyn sobbed, her perfectly styled hair falling into her eyes as panic truly set in. "Do you know who we are? We are prominent members of this community. We have powerful friends. This is a misunderstanding. Tell them, Thomas. Tell them it was all Marcus." Thomas said nothing. He simply held his wrists out his shoulders, slumping in total, absolute defeat. The metallic clink of the handcuffs securing Evelyn's wrists sounded absurdly loud against the jangling of her diamond bracelets. The woman who had routinely threatened to destroy my life, who had promised to take my child and leave me with nothing, was now being forcefully hauled out of her chair by federal agents. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as the former king and queen of high society were marched down the center aisle in disgrace. On the stage, Chloe watched her entire universe disintegrate. Her husband was pinned to the floor in handcuffs. Her parents were being paraded out like common criminals. Her fraudulent charity scam was still projected 20 feet high behind her for federal investigators to document. The money, the status, the manufactured superiority, it was all gone. She had nothing left to hide behind. Chloe's legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto the hard stage, the heavy beating of her couture gown scraping harshly against the floorboards. The arrogant, venomous woman who had commanded the room just 20 minutes earlier dissolved into a puddle of absolute despair. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, ignoring the gasps of the remaining guests. She grabbed the hem of my emerald green gown, her fingers clutching the silk like a drowning woman reaching for a lifeline. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup in thick, dark streaks. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a terror she had never experienced before. "Please, Maya." Chloe sobbed hysterically, her voice cracking into a high, desperate wail. "Please, I am your sister. Do not let them take me. I have nothing." Her tears soaked into the emerald silk of my hem, ruining the delicate fabric. But I felt absolutely nothing. The desperation radiating from Chloe was a palpable, foul energy, a pathetic culmination of a lifetime spent believing her own lies. She gripped the fabric tighter, her knuckles white, her perfect manicure, now looking like the claws of a desperate animal. The federal agents were securing the perimeter of the stage, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floorboards. But they paused for a fraction of a second, allowing this final brutal family reunion to play out under the blinding glare of the spotlights. "We are blood!" she shrieked, her voice entirely devoid of the polished, breathy cadence she used for her millions of followers. "You cannot do this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I did not know." I looked down at her. My expression remained perfectly composed, a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. I did not feel a shred of pity. I did not feel the familiar, suffocating guilt they had programmed into me since childhood. I felt liberated. I looked at the woman who had happily worn the stolen fruits of my labor, who had smiled for the cameras while actively participating in my planned destruction. "You told the internet I was a drug addict." I stated, my voice resonating with a quiet, lethal clarity that commanded the attention of everyone in the massive room. "You let Mom and Dad forge my name. You were perfectly content to let me take the fall for a federal crime while you counted your crowdfunding money." Chloe's mouth opened in a silent, horrified gasp as the absolute reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She had expected the sister she bullied to fold, to yield to protect her as I always had. But that sister was dead. Blood does not make you family, Chloe. I continued, leaning down just an inch to ensure she heard every single syllable. "It just makes you a parasite. I reached down and grasped her wrists. With slow, methodical pressure, I began to pry her trembling fingers off my dress. She whimpered, shaking her head in violent denial, but she had no strength left. Her grip broke. I let her hands fall to the floor. Instantly, two female FBI agents stepped forward. They hauled Chloe to her feet without a sliver of gentleness, spinning her around and securing her wrists behind her back with cold steel. She dissolved into an incoherent, blubbering mess, dragging her feet as they marched her toward the service exit, her designer gown snagging on a splintered piece of wood. I turned my gaze away from her retreating figure and looked down into the audience. The ballroom was completely chaotic, a sea of panicking billionaires and aggressive law enforcement officers, but a small clearing had formed around my parents. Agent Vance was standing over Thomas. Two tactical agents were actively forcing my father's arms behind his back. Thomas was resisting, his face purple with a mixture of sheer physical exertion and unprecedented humiliation. The tailored seams of his tuxedo jacket strained and tore as he fought the unyielding grip of the federal agents. He was a man who had never been denied, never been restrained, never been told no in his entire privileged existence. The loss of control was completely breaking his mind. He wrenched his head around his wild, bloodshot eyes, finding me standing above him on the illuminated stage. The illusion of the dignified patriarch evaporated entirely, revealing the vicious, selfish tyrant I had always known. "After everything we provided for you," Thomas yelled, his voice cracking with unhinged rage, spitting the words with venomous force. "We gave you your life. You are a monster, Maya." The accusation echoed through the cavernous space. Guests turned to look at me, expecting to see a daughter shrinking under the curse of her father. Instead, they saw me step to the very edge of the stage, standing tall, completely unaffected by his fury. I looked down at the man who had mortgaged my future to fund a lie, the man who had planned to leave me homeless to save his own reputation. "I am exactly the monster you created, Dad," I replied smoothly, my voice projecting clearly over the din of the federal raid. Efficient, calculating, and great with numbers. Thomas' face contorted in a mask of pure, impotent hatred, but he had no words left. One of the agents shoved him forcefully between the shoulder blades, propelling him forward. Beside him, Evelyn was entirely unresponsive. She had gone completely limp, her eyes vacant and glassy, practically being dragged by a female agent. The reality of losing her country club status, her mansions, and her freedom had caused her mind to simply shut down. They were paraded down the center aisle, passing tables of former friends who actively turned their backs, refusing to make eye contact with the disgraced couple. The operation was moving swiftly now. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom was being systematically cleared, the exits choked with flashing blue and red lights. I remained on the stage, the chaotic symphony of justice playing out around me. From the shadows near the wings, a scuffle broke out. 4 agents were hauling Marcus to his feet. His designer suit was covered in champagne and crushed food, his face bruised and swollen from where he had been driven into the marble floor. They dragged him roughly toward the main doors, forcing him to walk right past the front of the stage. He struggled against their grip, digging his expensive Italian shoes into the floor to slow his momentum. He wrenched his neck upward, locking his frantic, hateful gaze with mine. The golden boy of tech, the untouchable genius, was reduced to a filthy, handcuffed criminal. Yet even as his entire empire burned to ashes around him, his immense pathological arrogance refused to die. "This is not over," Marcus spat violently, struggling against the agents who were actively pulling him away. "You think you won? I will get out. I will tie you up in court for decades." I looked down at him from the podium. The fear that had dictated my life for the past year was completely gone. He was no longer a threat. He was just a pathetic, broken man facing the total annihilation of his freedom. A genuine cold smile spread across my face. I leaned forward, looking directly into his desperate, panicked eyes. "Enjoy federal prison." "Marcus?" I said, my voice dropping to a sharp, mocking whisper that cut perfectly through the noise. "I hear they do not take Centurion cards at the commissary." Marcus let out a roar of absolute fury, thrashing wildly, but the agents had lost their patience. They jerked his arms up sharply, forcing him to bend forward, and shoved him violently toward the shattered mahogany doors. The flashing lights of the police cruisers waiting outside illuminated his exit, swallowing him into the cold, unforgiving reality of the justice system. I stood alone on the stage, the heavy, suffocating weight of my family finally gone, breathing in the sweet, clear air of absolute victory. The ballroom rapidly emptied, the chaotic exodus, mirroring the sudden violent collapse of Marcus' artificial empire. The billionaires and institutional investors, realizing that shouting at an empty doorway would not magically restore their stolen capital, pivoted their aggression. They swarmed the remaining SEC agents and FBI personnel stationed near the exits. It was a pathetic, desperate scramble. Men who previously dictated terms to entire nations were now begging low-level federal investigators for immunity deals, demanding claim forms, and frantically trying to prove they were victims rather than complicit beneficiaries. I stood motionless behind the acrylic podium, watching the high society elite tear each other apart to secure whatever pennies might be left in the Vanguard accounts. The grand Ritz-Carlton ballroom, which just hours ago had been a monument to untouchable wealth and curated perfection, now looked like the aftermath of a riot. Custom-upholstered chairs were overturned, their gilded legs pointing toward the ceiling. The floor was a treacherous landscape of shattered crystal champagne flutes, trampled silk napkins, and crushed centerpieces. The illusion of elegance was completely destroyed, replaced by the ugly, visceral reality of unchecked greed. From the back of the room, the heavy oak door of the master audio-visual booth clicked open. David stepped out into the ruined ballroom. He did not rush. He navigated the debris-strewn floor with calm, deliberate steps, his eyes locked on me the entire time. He walked up the side stairs of the stage, his dress shoes echoing softly against the wooden floorboards. As he approached, the adrenaline that had fueled my every waking moment for the past year suddenly evaporated. The armor of cold calculation, the ruthless efficiency I had used to dismantle my own family, fell away, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. David walked right up to me and wrapped his arms securely around my shoulders, pulling me into a warm, grounding embrace. I dropped the microphone onto the podium and let my forehead rest against his chest. "You know," he whispered, his voice a mixture of absolute awe and gentle relief, "I always said you were scary when you had a spreadsheet open." I leaned my entire weight into him, finally letting out a long, shuddering, exhausted breath. The war was over. The cage was broken. I did not have to be the monster anymore. The morning sun streamed through the large bay windows of my apartment, casting long, bright shadows across the hardwood floor. I sat on my sofa with my legs pulled up, a steaming mug of black coffee resting in my hands. The television was on, the volume turned up just enough to fill the quiet space. Every single major news network was running wall-to-wall breaking coverage, The chyrons flashing across the bottom of the screen read like a victory march. High Society Ponzi Bust. Vanguard Engineering CEO denied bail. Prominent socialite family implicated in $50 million fraud. I watched as financial anchors detailed the forensic breakdown of Marcus' scam. They were broadcasting the exact flowcharts and asset maps I had projected in the ballroom the night before. Legal analysts and financial pundits were debating the sheer scale of the deception, marveling at the airtight, irrefutable evidence that had triggered the immediate federal raid. They were publicly praising the brilliant, anonymous forensic auditor who had managed to untangle an offshore web that had completely bypassed standard regulatory oversight. My phone sitting on the coffee table was vibrating constantly. It was a relentless, buzzing chorus of validation. I picked it up and scrolled through the flood of notifications. My LinkedIn inbox was overflowing with connection requests from top-tier financial institutions and federal agencies. There were dozens of text messages from former colleagues, the same partners and senior managers who had actively shunned me and placed me on administrative leave when Chloe's viral smear campaign first began. They were now sending frantic, backpedaling messages, congratulating me, claiming they had always known I was innocent, begging for a moment of my time. My professional reputation was not just restored, it was exalted. In the eyes of the financial world, I was no longer the unstable, jealous sister painted by a TikTok narrative. I was a whistleblowing hero, the razor-sharp mind who took down a titan of industry while entirely clearing my own name. A sharp, distinct chime cut through the buzzing. I glanced at my open laptop on the kitchen island. A high-priority email alert had just popped up on the screen. I set my coffee mug down, walked over and opened the message. It was an internal communication sent directly from the global CEO of my accounting firm. It was not a termination notice. It was a frantic, groveling apology wrapped in a highly lucrative offer. The CEO praised my unprecedented skill, stating that my independent investigation had not only exposed a massive criminal enterprise, but had simultaneously saved the firm from catastrophic SEC liability and total reputational ruin. He explicitly apologized for the firm rush to judgment during the public relations crisis. He was formally offering me a full partnership position complete with my own forensic division, an ungodly signing bonus, and the power to write my own ticket. They wanted me back at the very top of the food chain. I read the glowing, desperate offer, a slow, knowing smile playing on my lips. I hovered my cursor over the reply button. I looked around my quiet apartment, feeling the absolute power of total independence. I did not want their partnership. I did not want to return to a firm that had abandoned me at the first sign of trouble. I had just dismantled a $50 million empire with nothing but a laptop and my own intellect. I had a much bigger, far more disruptive idea in mind. 6 months later, that sweet air tasted even better from the 42nd floor of my own building. I sat behind a massive desk of reclaimed walnut, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered an unobstructed panoramic view of the Boston skyline. I had flatly declined the lucrative partnership offer from my former accounting firm. They had shown their true colors when they suspended me at the first sign of a public relations crisis, acting out of cowardice rather than integrity. I realized that working for people who prioritized optics over truth would only lead to another betrayal down the line. So I took my severance package, leveraged the massive industry buzz surrounding my unilateral takedown of Vanguard Engineering, and opened my own independent forensic accounting firm. We specialized exclusively in dismantling corporate fraud and untangling complex financial crimes. In less than half a year, my client waitlist was stretching 3 years long. Billion-dollar corporations, terrified of harboring their own hidden liabilities, were literally begging me to audit their subsidiaries. I had built a new empire on a foundation of absolute truth, and I answered to no one but myself. The frosted glass door to my office swung open. David walked in, carrying 2 steaming cups of artisan coffee. He had left his senior position at the old firm to become my lead investigative partner, a decision that had paid off exponentially for both of us. He navigated the sleek modern office with a relaxed confidence, setting one of the cups down on a pristine slate coaster on my desk. He dropped into one of the plush leather guest chairs, looking immensely satisfied. "Just got off the phone with the lead federal prosecutor," David announced, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "The sentencing phase is officially a wrap. Everything is on the public record." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, interlacing my fingers and resting them on my desk. "Tell me everything." David grinned, clearly enjoying the role of the messenger. Marcus finally caved. His high-priced defense team realized they had absolutely nothing to work with against your audit trail. He took the plea deal to avoid a lifetime sentence, 15 years in federal lockup without the possibility of early parole. The Securities and Exchange Commission completely liquidated his offshore accounts, seized his properties, and auctioned off his private jets to pay back the defrauded investors. He is completely ruined. I nodded, feeling a profound settling sense of closure. "And my parents?" David pulled up a digital file on his tablet, scrolling through the official court dockets. "Thomas and Evelyn were sentenced to 5 years each in a federal penitentiary for conspiracy, identity theft, and wire fraud. The IRS stepped in right after the sentencing and seized their remaining legitimate assets to cover their massive back taxes and the federal fraud penalties. The Beacon Hill estate, the luxury cars, the country club memberships, they are all gone. They are completely, irrevocably bankrupt. They will leave prison with nothing but the clothes on their backs." I absorbed the information quietly. The two people who had spent my entire life measuring human worth by bank account balances had been stripped of their only defining characteristic. "What about the influencer of the year?" I asked, my voice laced with mild, detached amusement. David chuckled, shaking his head. "Chloe avoided jail time by turning state evidence against your parents and Marcus the second the FBI offered her a deal. But the federal judge showed absolutely no mercy on her financial restitution. She owes a massive federal fine for the fraudulent charity campaign she ran using your name. Since all her assets were seized and her social media accounts are permanently banned by court order, she had to get a real job. The prosecutor noted that she is currently working a minimum wage retail shift at a discount clothing store out in the deep suburbs. She spends 40 hours a week folding cheap sweaters and dealing with angry customers just to meet her monthly court-mandated restitution payments. A sharp, distinct vibration interrupted our conversation. My personal cell phone was buzzing against the walnut wood of my desk. The screen displayed an unknown, out-of-state number. Normally, I routed all unlisted calls directly to my assistant, but today a strange, undeniable intuition urged me to answer. I tapped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Maya." The voice was thin, raspy, and entirely stripped of its former manufactured glamour. It lacked the breathy, arrogant confidence that had defined her entire public persona. It was Chloe. "Maya, please do not hang up," Chloe sobbed, her breath hitching pathetically into the receiver. "I am using a prepaid burner phone. I have nobody else to call. Mom and Dad are gone. Marcus is locked up. The federal agents took my apartment and all my designer clothes. I am living in a terrible, filthy motel out by the highway, and my shift manager just cut my hours because I was late for my shift. I'm going to be put out on the street tomorrow." I remained entirely silent. I sat in my beautifully lit office, feeling the soft leather of my chair, and let her wallow in the miserable reality she had built for herself. I did not offer a single word of comfort. "Please," Chloe begged, her voice cracking into a high, desperate whine that echoed through the small speaker. "I just need a loan. $500. Just to make my rent for the week so I do not have to sleep outside. I promise I will pay you back. I know you have so much money now. I saw your new firm on the news. Please, Maya, you have to help me. We are sisters." I looked around my immaculate, quiet office. I looked at David, who was watching me with raised eyebrows, sensing exactly who was on the other end of the line. I thought about the years of psychological torment, the stolen identity, the casual cruelty, and the moment she tried to abandon me to federal prison while she counted her stolen money. "I do not have that kind of money lying around," I said, my voice perfectly smooth, steady, and entirely devoid of mercy. "Try Uber." I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button, disconnecting the call mid-sob. I tapped the contact options and selected block caller permanently. I set the phone face down on my desk, picked up my coffee, and turned my attention back to the lucrative empire I had built with my own two hands. I closed my laptop and let out a slow, steady breath that felt entirely different from any breath I had taken in 35 years. I rode the private glass-walled elevator down to the lobby of my own building, watching the bustling Boston streets approach. Stepping out through the revolving doors, the late afternoon air felt incredibly clean. For the first time in my life, I was not bracing myself for a toxic phone call from my mother, a passive-aggressive text from my sister, or a legal threat engineered by my father. I was just Maya, a wife, a mother, and the undisputed architect of a multi-million-dollar firm. I walked to my car and began the drive home. I was not returning to the heavy, oppressive Victorian house in Beacon Hill. That property burdened with the ghosts of my family, deceit, the bitter memories of failed medical treatments, and the stench of forged deeds had been sold the very week Marcus was indicted. David and I had used the proceeds along with the massive influx of capital from our new firm to buy something entirely ours. I drove past the city limits, winding through a quiet, heavily wooded suburb. I pulled into the sweeping tree-lined driveway of our new property. It was a stunning, modern architectural masterpiece, situated on 2 acres of lush private woodland. It featured massive walls of glass that let in abundant natural light, completely devoid of the dark wood and suffocating arrogant traditions of my childhood. As I stepped out of the car, a sound reached my ears that instantly washed away the lingering adrenaline of the workday. It was the bright, unfiltered laughter of a child. I walked around the side of the house toward the sprawling backyard. David was running across the freshly cut grass, playfully chasing our newly adopted son Leo. We had finalized the adoption just 3 months ago. He was a beautiful, perfect boy who had needed a home exactly as much as we had needed him. Watching David scoop Leo up into his arms, spinning him around while the little boy shrieked with pure joy, my chest tightened with an overwhelming, profound sense of gratitude. This was my family. This was the life I had fought a brutal war to secure. David caught sight of me and smiled, setting Leo down on his feet. Leo immediately sprinted toward me on eager, wobbly legs. I dropped my leather briefcase onto the grass and knelt down, catching him perfectly as he collided with my chest. I buried my face in his soft hair, breathing in the scent of sunshine and fresh air. I squeezed him tightly, silently, promising him that he would never know the conditional, transactional love that had poisoned my own upbringing. He would only ever know absolute, unwavering security. I stood up, balancing Leo comfortably on my hip as David walked over and wrapped his arm around my waist. He kissed my temple, his presence serving as the unshakable anchor it had always been. We started walking together toward the wide stone steps of the front porch. As we approached the massive oak front door, my steps faltered. My entire body went rigidly tense. Resting squarely on the center of the welcome mat was a plain brown cardboard package. For a split second, the severe psychological trauma of the past year seized me by the throat. My pulse spiked, hammering violently against my ribs. I flashed back to the endless stream of certified letters, the terrifying court summons, the fabricated evidence, and the horrifying realization that my own parents had forged my signature to steal my life. My analytical mind raced, automatically calculating worst-case scenarios. Was it another legal threat? A retaliation from one of Marcus' former offshore associates? A desperate, dangerous final play by Chloe? David felt the immediate, rigid shift in my posture. He stopped walking, his eyes following my gaze down to the unmarked box. He understood the trauma instantly. He did not dismiss my fear or tell me I was being dramatic. Instead, he gently placed his hand over mine, offering a firm, reassuring squeeze. "I have got it," he said, his voice steady and remarkably calm. He stepped forward, leaving me safely on the grass with Leo. David knelt down on the stone porch and carefully inspected the return address label. A slow, bright smile broke across his face, instantly dispelling the dark cloud of anxiety hovering over me. He grabbed the edge of the packing tape and ripped the box open with a loud, satisfying tear. He reached inside and pulled out a large, beautifully crafted mahogany frame. He turned around and held it up for me to see. It was the official state-issued business license for our new forensic accounting firm. The raised gold seal caught the late afternoon sunlight gleaming brilliantly. My name was printed across the center in bold, elegant lettering, unequivocally establishing me as the sole owner and managing director. I let out a long, shaky breath, the tension completely draining from my muscles. A genuine, radiant smile took over my face. I walked up the steps carrying Leo and ran my free hand over the smooth glass and rich wood of the frame. It was beautiful. It was the undeniable physical manifestation of my freedom. David leaned in and kissed me a deep, lingering kiss that communicated 1,000 words of pride and shared victory. We turned around together, standing on our porch, and looked out over the sprawling, peaceful yard. I looked at my husband, the man who had stood beside me, against an army of billionaires and corrupt family members. I looked at the beautiful boy in my arms, who would grow up surrounded by truth and unconditional support. For 35 years, I had been terrified of losing my family. I had been programmed to believe that without their validation, without my subservient place in their manufactured high society hierarchy, I would be nothing. I had feared that cutting them out would leave a massive, unfillable void in my chest. But as I stood there breathing in the clean, crisp evening air, I realized the absolute opposite was true. Cutting the toxic rot out of my life did not leave me empty. It left me with room. It gave me the space to finally breathe, to grow, to build, and to thrive on my own terms. The parasites were gone, and the host had survived. They left a box on my doorstep expecting me to surrender. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak. But what they did not understand is that an accountant does not fight with screams or fists. We fight with the truth, and the truth always balances the ledger in the end. The profound lesson from Maya's journey is that true security comes from within, not from conditional approval. Maya sought validation from a family that viewed her merely as a tool for their selfish gains. By embracing the truth and establishing ironclad boundaries, she dismantled their empire of lies and built a thriving life on her own terms. She teaches us that walking away from toxic blood ties doesn't leave you empty. It creates the space needed to cultivate genuine love and incredible success. Share your experiences about drawing hard boundaries to protect your own peace and comment below.